Hello, friends. Why did the Western Roman Empire fall under barbarian onslaughts while Byzantium endured for centuries? How did the mighty walls of Constantinople save the city when Rome's defenses crumbled? Why did Roman libraries vanish while Byzantine monasteries preserved knowledge? Today, we'll dive into the harsh and captivating history of two empires, Rome, which faded, and Byzantium, which shone. Welcome to Sleepless Simpleton, where we'll uncover the secrets of their lives, struggles, and legacies. Before we start, give a like if you enjoy my work and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, share where you're watching from and what time it is. Love to know who's joining us from around the world. Dim the lights, let your worries fade, and get ready. Let's dive in. The year is 476 CE, and the Western Roman Empire is crumbling. Imagine you are living in Rome at the close of this turbulent century, a time when the once mighty empire is on the brink of disintegration. If you are a farmer in the countryside near the city, you face a harsh and uncertain existence. The fertile lands that were once the breadbasket of the empire are now vulnerable to constant raids from barbarian groups like the Visigoths and Vandals. Your fields are burned, your crops plundered, and the security of your family is under constant threat. This was the reality for many across the Western Roman Empire, unprotected, impoverished, and struggling to survive. The soldiers who once guarded the empire's borders are either dead, scattered, or have abandoned their posts due to the crumbling economy and the empire's inability to maintain its military structure. The peace and order that the Roman legions once provided seem like distant memories. Rome itself, the heartbeat of the empire, had suffered greatly. By this time, the Roman political system was in disarray, plagued by corruption, ineffective leadership, and political instability. The Senate, which had once served as a symbol of Roman governance, had become a hollow institution, largely powerless against the increasing challenges faced by the empire. The emperor, once seen as a figure of ultimate power, was now little more than a figurehead in many instances, incapable of maintaining control over the sprawling empire. The final blow came when Romulus Augustulus, a young and ineffective ruler, was deposed in 476 CE by the barbarian chieftain Odoacer. With his deposition, the Western Roman Empire came to an official end, marking the fall of a civilization that had reigned for nearly 5 centuries. Yet, as the Western Roman Empire fell into disarray, the eastern half of the empire, the Byzantine Empire, was flourishing, and its capital, Constantinople, was poised to thrive for centuries to come. Imagine, in stark contrast, that you are standing in the bustling marketplace of Constantinople in the year 476 CE. The air is thick with the scent of spices, incense, and fresh produce, as merchants from all over the Mediterranean converge to trade their goods. The streets are crowded with people of all walks of life, noblemen in flowing robes, soldiers in shining armor, and common folk going about their daily business. The distant sound of hammers can be heard as artisans craft intricate jewelry and weapons, while the rhythms of daily life play out in the background. Far from the chaos that grips the Western Empire, Constantinople stands as a thriving metropolis, its citizens secure within the embrace of massive, unbreachable walls. The city's strategic location on the Bosphorus Strait not only shields it from attacks but also makes it a vital hub for trade, connecting the east and west. The city's bustling economy remains strong, with wealth flowing from the markets, the docks, and the silk trade. Constantinople is a beacon of prosperity, its fortified walls standing firm against the tides of time and conflict that have already swept away much of the Western Empire. The survival of the Byzantine Empire, in contrast to the fall of the Western Roman Empire, can be traced to a combination of factors, geographical, economic, and political, that created a fundamentally different environment for the people of the East. One of the most important factors in the survival of the Byzantine Empire was its geographic location. Unlike the Western Roman Empire, which was spread across a vast expanse of land, with borders that were difficult to defend, the Byzantine Empire was located in a region that was much more defensible. Constantinople itself was situated on the Bosphorus Strait, strategically positioned between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. This made it not only a crucial trading hub but also an ideal military stronghold. The natural barriers of water on either side of the city provided a formidable defense against invaders, while the thick walls surrounding the city made it nearly impenetrable. When barbarians or rival empires sought to challenge the Byzantines, they found themselves facing an unyielding fortress. Even the mighty Arab forces, who threatened Constantinople in the 7th and 8th centuries, were unable to breach the city's defenses, thanks in large part to the strategic location and the brilliance of Byzantine engineering. Meanwhile, The Western Roman Empire's vast territory, stretching from Spain to the Middle East, created logistical challenges that were simply impossible to overcome. The Western Empire's borders were constantly under attack, from the north by barbarian tribes and from the east by the expanding powers of Persia. The empire's resources were stretched thin, and its ability to respond to external threats became increasingly weakened as its internal divisions and corruption drained its strength. Economically, the Byzantine Empire had a much more stable and diversified economy than the Western Roman Empire. In the West, the collapse of Roman infrastructure, combined with ongoing invasions, caused widespread economic disruption. The western provinces were often left without protection, and the loss of trade routes further strained the economy. Meanwhile, the wealthy landowners who controlled vast estates in the West often found themselves disconnected from the central authority of Rome, leading to further fragmentation and disintegration. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire's economy was based on a strong and diversified system. Constantinople itself was a thriving center of trade, connecting the East and West through its strategic location. The Byzantines capitalized on their control of the Mediterranean and Black Seas, facilitating trade in goods such as silk, grain, and spices. The wealth generated from these trade routes allowed the empire to maintain a strong military, fund public works, and support the complex bureaucracy that kept the empire functioning. The economy was further bolstered by a more centralized system of governance, which allowed the emperor to exert greater control over the empire's vast resources. The Byzantines were able to maintain a level of stability and prosperity that was simply impossible for the Western Romans. The political structure of the Byzantine Empire was another key factor in its survival. While the Western Roman Empire struggled with corruption, weak leadership, and political fragmentation, the Byzantine Empire benefited from a more centralized and effective system of governance. The emperor, unlike his Western counterpart, held supreme authority over both the military and the government, allowing for a more unified response to internal and external challenges. Additionally, the Byzantine emperors were often more adept at diplomacy and military strategy than their Western counterparts. They formed alliances with neighboring states, employed mercenaries when necessary, and used their wealth to maintain a powerful military presence. This ability to adapt and respond to challenges allowed the Byzantine Empire to endure for over 1,000 years after the fall of the West. In the West, the collapse of the empire led to a breakdown in communication and governance. The decentralized nature of Roman rule in the West made it difficult to coordinate a unified response to the waves of invasions that swept across the empire. The power struggles among various factions, combined with the declining loyalty of the Roman legions, left the empire vulnerable to collapse. Imagine a time when two very different rulers, though separated by distance and circumstance, shaped the fate of two empires. In the West, you are Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. You sit in your small, relatively insignificant court, surrounded by a court of diminished power. You are young, barely a teenager, and your reign is little more than a figurehead in a world already slipping into chaos. The great Roman Empire, once a symbol of power, culture, and military might, is no more than a shadow of its former self, fractured and in decline. The people of your empire look to you not as a ruler with authority, but as a symbol of everything that has gone wrong. You can hear the distant sounds of barbarian tribes encroaching on your borders, and you feel a sense of helplessness, unable to stop the tide of history from sweeping away the empire your ancestors built. In 476 CE, the events unfold swiftly. The last vestiges of Roman power, held by your imperial family, are swept aside by Odoacer, the barbarian chieftain who deposes you, effectively bringing the Western Roman Empire to an end. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. For centuries, the Roman Empire had stood as the unchallenged ruler of the known world, its legions marching across vast territories. Now, the Western Empire collapses not with a bang, but with a whimper, as your young and powerless reign fades into history. In your final days as emperor, you are given little more than a life of exile, far from the grandeur of the imperial palace. The last Roman emperor of the West becomes a mere footnote in the pages of history, his fate sealed not by military defeat, but by the shifting currents of time and power. Now, shift your imagination to the East, where in the same era, a different emperor's story unfolds. You are Constantine the Great, and you hold the future of an empire not on the brink of collapse, but on the edge of transformation. Born in the small town of Nisus in 272 CE, you rise to become one of the most significant rulers in history, founding the city of Constantinople and laying the groundwork for the Byzantine Empire. Unlike Romulus Augustulus, your reign begins with purpose and vision. You are not a puppet emperor, You are a man of ambition and foresight, capable of navigating the complexities of politics, warfare, and religion. You come to power at a time when the Roman Empire is at a crossroads, racked by internal strife and external threats. Yet, unlike the weakening Western Empire, the eastern portion of the empire holds strong, and you, Constantine, understand that change is necessary to secure its future. Your reign is marked by transformative decisions, none more impactful than your conversion to Christianity. In 312 C, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, you experience a divine vision. The cross, you believe, is a sign from the Christian God, and in that moment, you embrace the faith. Soon after, you issue the Edict of Milan in 313 C, granting religious tolerance throughout the empire. This decision not only alters the religious landscape of the Roman world but also sets the stage for the Byzantine Empire's deep connection to Christianity. Unlike Romulus Augustulus, who inherited an empire in decline, your reign marks the beginning of a new era, one that will see Constantinople become a beacon of Christianity, law, and culture. Your greatest achievement, however, is the founding of a new capital, Constantinople, on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. By 330 C, you have transformed the city into a grand imperial capital, one that will rival Rome in splendor and power. The city's strategic location on the Bosphorus Strait allows it to control vital trade routes between Europe and Asia, making it a hub of commerce, culture, and politics for centuries to come. Your vision and leadership lay the foundation for the Byzantine Empire, and although you will pass away in 337 C, your legacy will endure for over a millennium. As you, Constantine, establish your reign, your actions stand in stark contrast to those of Romulus Augustulus. While Romulus is a powerless figurehead, Constantine is a visionary reformer, actively shaping the future of his empire. You establish new laws, promote the spread of Christianity, and strengthen the military. You are not just a ruler by title but a ruler by action, using your influence to lay the groundwork for an empire that will thrive long after your death. The comparison between these two rulers is striking. Romulus, the last emperor of the West, represents the final, faded days of an empire in decline, a symbol of lost power and inevitability. His reign is brief and largely inconsequential in the grand scope of history. Constantine, on the other hand, is the architect of a new empire, one that will outlast the Western Roman Empire by more than 1,000 years. While Romulus fades into obscurity, Constantine's legacy will shape the future of Europe, influencing everything from religion to governance to culture. The stark differences between these two men, the last Western emperor and the first Byzantine ruler, illustrate the deep divides between the fates of the Western and Eastern Roman empires. Where the West crumbled under the weight of internal corruption, economic instability, and external threats, the East found strength in reform, vision, and adaptability. Constantine's rise was not a mere political maneuver. It was a reshaping of the empire itself, creating a new center of power and culture that would endure long after the West had fallen. The contrasting stories of Romulus Augustulus and Constantine the Great are not just tales of two men. They are the stories of two empires at the crossroads of history. While the Western Roman Empire succumbed to its many pressures, the Byzantine Empire emerged, fortified by the leadership of rulers like Constantine. This segment highlights not just the contrast between these two rulers, but also the diverging paths that the Western and Eastern Roman empires took. One empire faded into the past, while the other, under visionary leadership, adapted and survived for centuries to come. As night falls, imagine yourself standing at the base of two of the most iconic defenses in the ancient world, the Theodosian walls of Constantinople and the crumbling Aurelian walls of Rome. These two architectural feats, one a symbol of Byzantine strength, the other a remnant of Roman grandeur, offer a striking contrast in the fates of two mighty empires. Let's begin with the Theodosian walls, which encircled the magnificent city of Constantinople. These walls, completed in the early 5th century, are among the greatest achievements of Byzantine engineering. Towering, robust, and well constructed, they stretch for miles, enveloping the city in an unbreachable barrier of stone and mortar. The walls consist of three main sections: the inner wall, the outer wall, and a massive moat that separates the two, adding another layer of protection. Standing before them, you can see that these walls are not merely defensive. They are a statement of power and permanence, a testament to the Byzantine commitment to safeguard their empire from the constant threats lurking at their borders. These fortifications were designed with foresight. The walls feature over 90 towers, each one strategically placed to give defenders a vantage point over the surrounding terrain. The inner walls are thick, and their height allows archers and soldiers to rain down arrows and stones upon any invader who dares approach. But it was not just the strength of the walls themselves that made them formidable. Behind them stood an impressive network of military infrastructure, gates, armories, and barracks, all designed to house and equip the defenders who would protect Constantinople from siege. These defenses proved their worth time and time again, repelling numerous attacks over the centuries, including the famous sieges by the Avars, the Persians, and later, the Ottoman Turks. The walls became a symbol not only of military might but of the enduring spirit of the Byzantine Empire. Now, imagine the contrast with the city of Rome, whose defenses, though once formidable, are now little more than ruins. The Aurelian walls, constructed in the early 3rd century by Emperor Aurelian, were designed to protect the city from barbarian invasions. These walls, built of brick and stone, encircled the ancient heart of Rome, covering an impressive 19 kilometers. In their heyday, the Aurelian walls were a marvel of Roman military architecture, a testament to the empire's ability to defend itself from external threats. But over time, as the empire grew more distant from its imperial heart, the walls, and the city they protected, fell into neglect. As you stand in the ruins of Rome's once great walls, you can sense the difference. The Aurelian walls, though still imposing in certain stretches, have lost much of their former strength. The stone is weathered, cracked, and in many places, the wall has been breached by centuries of neglect and the ravages of time. Rome's defenses were designed to protect a city that, over time, became less focused on military dominance and more concerned with internal political struggles. As the Western Roman Empire fractured, the walls became less relevant, a relic of a time when Rome was at the height of its power. The contrast between the Theodosian walls and the Aurelian walls illustrates a deeper difference between the fates of the Western Roman and Byzantine empires. The Aurelian walls of Rome were built during a period of relative stability, when Rome's power seemed unassailable. Yet, as the empire grew weaker, these defenses became less effective. The decline of the Western Roman Empire saw a shift in priorities. Internal strife, political fragmentation, and a dwindling military focus left the once immense city of Rome vulnerable. The Aurelian walls, once a symbol of Roman might, became a neglected barrier that failed to stop the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In contrast, the Theodosian walls were built at a time when the Byzantine Empire, though facing threats from all directions, was determined to survive. The walls were not just a means of defense, they were a symbol of resilience. The Byzantines invested in their fortifications because they knew that their survival depended on it. They understood that Constantinople was their last bastion, and they poured resources into ensuring its defense. The Theodosian walls would stand for centuries, withstanding invasions and sieges, and providing a measure of stability in a region constantly beset by conflict. But beyond the sheer strength of these fortifications, what made the Theodosian walls so effective was their integration into the larger military strategy of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines did not simply rely on walls to defend their city. They had an entire military apparatus designed to protect Constantinople. Behind the walls, the Byzantines maintained a well-trained army, ready to defend their city at a moment's notice. And the walls themselves were designed to be part of a broader system of defense, with access points and gates that could be shut quickly to prevent enemy entry. The city's location, with its natural barriers on the north and south, further ensured that Constantinople was a difficult target for invaders. The Aurelian walls, by contrast, were part of a broader Roman system of military defense that eventually faltered. While they were once part of an empire that boasted the world's most powerful military, the Western Roman Empire had become overextended and fragmented. The empire's ability to respond to threats was increasingly compromised, and the Aurelian walls, no matter how strong, could not protect the city from the invasions that ultimately led to Rome's decline. The mystery of why the Theodosian walls endured while the Aurelian walls failed to protect Rome lies not only in their construction but in the political and military realities that shaped their respective empires. The Byzantine Empire, though smaller and more vulnerable in many ways, was more centralized and more focused on preserving its core. In contrast, the Western Roman Empire, already divided and struggling, failed to maintain the unity and resources necessary to defend its capital. The Aurelian walls may have been strong, but the empire that built them was too fragmented to support their defense. As you stand in the shadows of these two great walls, the story of their differing fates becomes clear. The Theodosian walls stand tall, still echoing the resilience of the Byzantine Empire, while the Aurelian walls, weathered and crumbling, tell the tale of a once great empire that lost its way. The defense of these cities, Rome and Constantinople, becomes a metaphor for the larger story of the empires they protected, one that fell into ruin, and the other that endured for centuries. Imagine standing in the heart of two contrasting worlds, one opulent, grand, and filled with imperial splendor, the other, more intimate and disconnected from the power that once was. On one side, you have the great palace of Constantinople, the beating heart of the Byzantine Empire, a place where emperors lived, ruled, and displayed their divine right to govern. On the other, the villas of Roman senators, which, in the final days of the Western Roman Empire, had become symbols of a once great power now fading into the background of history. This segment will delve into the lifestyles of these elites, exploring how their contrasting residences reflect the broader fates of the Western and Eastern Roman empires. Let's begin by imagining yourself walking through the vast, sprawling corridors of the Great Palace of Constantinople. Constructed during the reign of Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century and expanded over centuries, this palace was not just a residence, it was the very embodiment of imperial power. The palace complex itself was an intricate network of buildings, halls, and courtyards, covering a vast expanse on the southern edge of the city. Inside, the emperor's residence was filled with luxurious decorations, including mosaics depicting emperors and saints, rich tapestries, and marble columns that rose to dizzying heights. The walls, adorned with golden accents, seemed to shimmer in the light, reflecting the grandeur of the Byzantine Empire. Imagine the sounds of courtiers and advisors discussing matters of state, the subtle hum of power moving through the rooms as decisions that would affect the entire empire were made. The imperial throne room was the center of the palace, where the emperor would receive visitors, foreign dignitaries, and ambassadors from distant lands. Unlike the villas of the Roman senators, the Great Palace was designed to display the divine authority of the emperor. It was a place not just for living but for performing the sacred duties of a ruler. The emperor was not only a political leader but also a figure of divine authority, and this was reflected in the palace's design. The architecture itself was meant to evoke a sense of awe, reminding all who entered that they stood before the personification of the Byzantine Empire's strength, stability, and divine favor. The palace was more than just a residence. It was a public space where the emperor's divine right to rule was on full display. In contrast, imagine the luxurious villas of the Roman senators. These homes, scattered across the Roman countryside and within the city itself, were places of retreat, far removed from the tumultuous politics of Rome in its final years. The villas were often vast estates, surrounded by sprawling gardens, with a focus on leisure and relaxation. Roman senators, once the true rulers of the empire, could now only cling to their wealth and influence, their power reduced to the control of land and resources. These villas were symbols of a decaying elite, disconnected from the empire's center of power as the Western Roman Empire fragmented. As the empire grew more chaotic, the once vibrant political life of Rome was replaced by a quieter, more isolated existence for the aristocracy. Gone were the days when senators actively participated in decision-making or military campaigns. Now, their villas were places for personal indulgence, surrounded by luxury, but isolated from the larger events unfolding in the empire. The villas of the Western Roman elite contrasted sharply with the imperial palaces of the Byzantine Empire. While the senators of Rome retreated into the comfort of their estates, the emperors of Byzantium remained in the heart of the empire, overseeing its military, religious, and political affairs. The difference between these two types of residences speaks volumes about the state of the two empires. In the West, the fragmentation of the empire, along with the decline of central authority, left the elite class disillusioned, disconnected, and uncertain. Wealth and luxury had become their primary concerns, and they turned inward, focusing on maintaining personal fortunes rather than supporting the empire that had once afforded them such power. The Byzantine emperors, on the other hand, continued to reside at the heart of their empire, in palaces that symbolized not just personal wealth but the strength of the Byzantine state. The Great Palace of Constantinople was a place where the emperor remained directly involved in governance, in military decisions, and in the maintenance of the empire's complex systems of law and administration. While the Roman senators withdrew from the duties of leadership, the Byzantine emperor's palaces were filled with political and cultural activity, bustling with life and decisions that shaped the fate of the empire. The very nature of these residences reflects the broader decline of the Western Roman Empire and the strength of the Byzantine Empire. In Rome, as political power shifted away from the emperor to local elites, the senators' villas became symbols of a disjointed empire, where power was no longer centralized or unified. In contrast, the Byzantine emperors remained in their palaces, overseeing a centralized state where authority was maintained and enforced. and the vision for the empire remained intact. Moreover, these residences were not just practical spaces for the elites, they were tools of propaganda. The Byzantine palace complex was designed not only to be a comfortable home for the emperor but also to project his authority to the people. The luxurious design, the elaborate mosaics, and the public spaces of the palace all reinforced the idea of the emperor's divine right to rule. The Roman villas, on the other hand, were more focused on personal comfort and wealth, a reflection of an aristocracy whose power was fading, unable to adapt to the changing political realities of a dying empire. In the final days of the Western Roman Empire, the elite withdrew into their villas, disconnected from the political life of the empire. In the Byzantine Empire, the emperors maintained their connection to the state, living in palaces that symbolized both their personal power and the empire's continued strength. The contrast between these two residences, the imperial palace of Constantinople and the villas of the Roman senators, serves as a vivid reminder of the diverging fates of the two empires. One empire's elite withdrew into isolation, while the other continued to rule from the center of power, maintaining its strength and unity for centuries to come. Imagine yourself as a farmer in the late 5th century, standing in the fields of the Western Roman Empire, watching as the sun begins to dip behind the horizon. The days are long, the work is hard, and the future seems uncertain. You toil in your fields, the land once fertile under Roman rule now slowly yielding less and less. The roads that were once well maintained now lay in disrepair, and your nearest city, once a thriving center of culture and commerce, is increasingly isolated and abandoned. The empire is fractured, and the once strong legions that protected your home are now gone, leaving you vulnerable to marauding barbarian tribes. Each day is a struggle to survive, as your crops are raided, taxes rise, and the local authorities seem unable to provide any meaningful assistance. The future of your family and your land seems uncertain, and the once proud Roman Empire, which promised peace and prosperity, is crumbling around you. In contrast, let your imagination transport you to the rural heartlands of the Byzantine Empire. The land is still under the rule of the emperor, but unlike in the West, there is a sense of stability, though not without its own challenges. You are a landowner, not a simple farmer, and your estate is a thriving part of the Byzantine agricultural system. Though there are still taxes to pay, the empire's centralized government ensures that the markets are stable and the roads remain well kept. In the distance, you see the fortified city of Constantinople, and though it may seem far away, you are assured that the Byzantine government maintains control of your region. The empire is alive, its administration still functioning smoothly, and though you work hard to cultivate the land, the rewards are stable, and the future, though not guaranteed, feels much more secure than the uncertainty that looms over the West. The contrast between life in the rural West and the rural East in this period illustrates how differently the two empires treated their agricultural sectors and the people who lived off the land. In the West, the collapse of central authority meant that local landowners had to fend for themselves. The roads, which once allowed for easy transportation of goods, had fallen into disrepair, and the trade routes were no longer secure. With the central government fragmented, the protection that had once been offered by the Roman legions was no longer available. As a result, Western farmers and landowners were left vulnerable to invasion, and the once thriving agricultural economy began to crumble. Moreover, the Roman system of large estates, which had been operated by slave labor, began to break down, and the Roman agricultural methods, which had been some of the most advanced in the world, started to decline as well. Meanwhile, in the Byzantine East, the situation was quite different. The land was still controlled by a centralized government, which maintained a strong system of taxation, land ownership, and agricultural reforms. Unlike the West, the Byzantine Empire kept its roads and infrastructure in relatively good condition. The farmers, who worked the land, were often part of a larger, more organized economic system, one in which agriculture was deeply intertwined with the broader workings of the empire. Byzantine landowners, while still burdened with taxes, enjoyed the benefits of a more stable society. The land was not as constantly threatened by invasions, and the system of land management allowed for a more consistent output of agricultural products, benefiting both the landowners and the empire as a whole. The Byzantine system also had its own set of unique agricultural reforms that helped ensure stability. Land ownership in Byzantium was often closely tied to the military and social structures of the empire. The imperial government maintained control over large tracts of land, which were often used to support the military. Soldiers were given land to cultivate in exchange for their service, and this helped to ensure that the Byzantine military remained strong, even during times of war. In addition, the government took steps to protect farmers and landowners from external threats, whether they came from barbarian invasions or internal political turmoil. The empire's strong central authority ensured that the agricultural economy remained largely unaffected by the chaos that plagued the Western Roman Empire. But despite the stability, life as a landowner in the Byzantine East was not without its challenges. The taxation system was still harsh, and Byzantine farmers and landowners had to deal with the burden of paying tribute to the emperor. The Byzantine Empire was also not immune to internal conflict, and periods of war and instability did affect rural life. The Byzantine farmers and landowners were still at the mercy of the empire's military campaigns and political struggles, but they were far better protected by the empire's strong governance than their counterparts in the West. The contrast between the rural lives of farmers in the Western Roman Empire and those in the Byzantine Empire reveals the deep structural differences between the two empires. The West, with its fractured political system, could not protect its rural population, and the lack of infrastructure and support left the land vulnerable to outside threats. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire's strong central government allowed it to maintain control over its agricultural regions, ensuring that the land remained productive and that the people who worked it were better supported. While both the West and East faced challenges, the Byzantine Empire's centralized governance, stable economy, and military reforms helped ensure that the agricultural sector, and by extension, the lives of rural inhabitants, were more secure. In the end, the differences in the treatment of rural populations and agricultural systems highlight the broader contrast between the two empires. The Western Roman Empire's inability to maintain control over its land and its reliance on fragmented local leadership contributed to its collapse. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire's centralized, organized approach to governance allowed it to endure for centuries, even in the face of external threats and internal challenges. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of history, witnessing two monumental moments that shaped the destinies of two great empires. On one side, you have the fall of Rome, the heart of the Western Roman Empire, a city that had once ruled over vast territories and commanded immense power. The year is 410 CE, and the Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, have breached the city's gates. The once imposing Aurelian walls, which had stood for centuries, are now useless against the tide of invaders. The city's population, once thriving and bustling with activity, is now in a state of panic, confusion, and despair. The streets echo with the sounds of conflict as Roman citizens, who had grown accustomed to their empire's grandeur, now find themselves at the mercy of foreign invaders. This was the first time in nearly 800 years that Rome had been sacked, a humiliating and devastating blow to the once great empire. As the Visigoths pour into the city, the shock and fear are palpable. Temples are looted, homes are burned, and the once proud institutions of Rome fall into disarray. You, a Roman citizen, are caught in the chaos. The emperor, Honorius, has fled the city, leaving the populace to fend for themselves. The legions, once the pride of the empire, are nowhere to be found, and the city that had once been a symbol of power is now a shell of its former self. You witness firsthand the devastation of your beloved city, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that permeates the streets. The empire that once promised peace and prosperity is now in ruins, its glory extinguished, as the West collapses under the weight of internal corruption, external invasions, and political fragmentation. Now, let us shift to a different scene, one of resilience and tenacity. The year is 626 CE, and Constantinople, the proud capital of the Byzantine Empire, is under siege. The city, though far from invincible, has stood for centuries, its mighty Theodosian walls protecting it from countless invasions. This time, however, the threat is greater than ever before. The combined forces of the Avars, Persians, and Slavs have surrounded the city, determined to break through its defenses and bring an end to the Byzantine Empire. The stakes are high, and the fate of Constantinople, and the Byzantine Empire itself, hangs in the balance. As you stand within the walls of Constantinople, the tension is palpable. The air is thick with anticipation, and the sound of drums and horns fills the air as the defenders prepare for battle. You are not just a witness, you are a participant in this epic struggle. The Byzantine Emperor, Heraclius, has rallied his forces, and the city's defenders are ready to hold their ground. You can hear the clashing of swords, the cries of soldiers, and the roar of battle outside the city walls as the siege intensifies. Unlike the fall of Rome, the siege of Constantinople is not met with helplessness. The Byzantine Empire, despite its challenges, has maintained a strong central authority. The military is organized, the defenses are robust, and the citizens are resolute in their determination to protect their city. The Avars and Persians, though numerous, find themselves struggling against the might of Constantinople's fortifications. The city's defenders, including soldiers, mercenaries, and ordinary citizens, hold their ground with remarkable courage, fighting back with every ounce of strength they have. But what makes the siege of Constantinople truly remarkable is the role of a mysterious force, Greek fire. This incendiary weapon, which the Byzantines had developed, becomes a game-changer in the siege. When the invaders attempt to breach the walls and attack the city with siege engines, the defenders unleash Greek fire, a substance that burns with an intense, almost magical heat, spreading across the water and land, creating an impenetrable barrier of flames. The Avars and Persians, caught off guard by this terrifying weapon, are forced to retreat. The siege ends in failure for the invaders, and Constantinople's defenses hold firm. The contrast between the fall of Rome in 410 CE and the siege of Constantinople in 626 CE is stark. In Rome, the empire had already begun to unravel, weakened by internal divisions, economic instability, and political corruption. The city's defenses, while once formidable, were no longer enough to withstand the pressure of external forces. The fall of Rome was a symbol of the Western Roman Empire's decline, a slow, inevitable collapse that could not be stopped. In contrast, the siege of Constantinople represents the resilience of the Byzantine Empire, which, despite facing a dire threat, was able to defend its capital. The Byzantines were able to adapt to the changing realities of warfare, utilizing new technologies, like Greek fire, and maintaining a strong, centralized government that could mobilize resources in times of crisis. The military organization, the fortified defenses, and the unity of the city's defenders all played a role in repelling the invaders. The result was not just survival, but triumph. This difference in outcome between the two cities reflects the broader contrast between the Western and Eastern Roman empires. Rome, weakened by internal strife and external threats, could not withstand the pressure and fell to the Visigoths. The Byzantine Empire, on the other hand, was able to adapt, innovate, and defend its capital against a much larger coalition of forces. The siege of Constantinople became a defining moment in Byzantine history, a testament to the empire's ability to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. Both the fall of Rome and the siege of Constantinople highlight the importance of military strategy, technological innovation, and political unity in the survival of an empire. The Western Roman Empire, fragmented and disorganized, could not defend its most iconic city. The Byzantine Empire, on the other hand, was able to rely on its strong leadership, effective military strategies, and technological advancements to protect its capital and maintain its influence for centuries to come. As you reflect on these two moments in history, you realize that the difference in outcome is not just a matter of fortifications or military might, but of resilience. The fall of Rome was the end of an era, while the siege of Constantinople marked the continuation of a new and vibrant empire, one that would survive for nearly another 1,000 years. Imagine stepping into the quiet, dimly lit corridors of an ancient library in Rome, surrounded by scrolls of papyrus and parchment that have survived centuries of turmoil. This is a time when the written word was a treasure, a powerful tool for preserving knowledge, culture, and history. The Roman Empire had once boasted great libraries, among them the famous Library of Alexandria, the heart of intellectual life in the ancient world. These libraries were hubs of knowledge, where scholars gathered to study, debate, and share ideas. But as the Western Roman Empire crumbled under the weight of invasions, political strife, and internal decay, these repositories of wisdom faced their own demise. Imagine walking through the halls of one such library as it is slowly emptied, its scrolls and books dispersed, looted, or destroyed by the Visigoths in 410 CE. The loss is monumental, not just of physical texts, but of the intellectual heritage that the empire had accumulated over centuries. As the Western Roman Empire faded, so too did the libraries that had been the keepers of its knowledge. Scholars who once had access to vast collections of texts now found themselves scattered and powerless, unable to protect or preserve what remained of the intellectual heritage of Rome. The burning of the libraries and the looting of their contents marked the loss of much of the ancient world's written knowledge. The great works of literature, philosophy, and science were lost to time or relegated to obscurity. Even the famous Roman historian Tacitus, whose writings had chronicled the rise and fall of emperors, became an almost forgotten voice, with his works scattered and partially lost. What remained of the libraries was often fragmented, surviving only in bits and pieces or through the preservation of select texts by later scholars. Yet, while the libraries of the West were disappearing, the East, specifically in the Byzantine Empire, was actively preserving knowledge. If you could now transport yourself to a monastery in the Byzantine Empire, you would see something quite different: the busy scriptoria, where monks and scholars diligently copied manuscripts, preserving the knowledge of the ancient world for future generations. The Byzantine Empire, though often besieged and under threat, understood the importance of preserving the cultural and intellectual legacy of both Rome and Greece. The scriptoria, small rooms set aside for writing, were filled with monks bent over their work, carefully copying texts, one painstaking word at a time. These Byzantine scholars were not just copying ancient texts for the sake of preservation. They were deeply engaged with the works they transcribed, interpreting them and adding their own commentary. They were the guardians of knowledge, making sure that the works of the great philosophers, historians, and scientists of the ancient world would not be lost to time. The rise of Christianity in the Byzantine Empire also played a key role in the preservation of knowledge, as many important texts were copied and maintained in the context of Christian monastic life. Even pagan works, once deemed heretical by early Christian authorities, found a place in the Byzantine scriptoria, where they were copied, preserved, and sometimes even revered. One of the most famous examples of this preservation is the work of the Byzantine scholar and monk, Cassiodorus, who established a library and scriptoria in the 6th century. He believed that the preservation of both Christian and classical knowledge was essential for the future of the empire. Under his direction, monks copied not only Christian texts but also the works of Greek and Roman philosophers, historians, and poets, ensuring that these works would survive the centuries. The contrast between the fate of the libraries in the West and the scriptoria of the East speaks volumes about the different priorities of the two empires. In the West, the collapse of the empire and the invasions by barbarian groups led to the loss of much of the intellectual heritage of Rome. The libraries, once vibrant centers of learning, were left vulnerable to the ravages of war, neglect, and decay. The cultural life of the Western Roman Empire, which had been the foundation of its greatness, was dismantled, and with it, the knowledge that had shaped centuries of history. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire, though facing its own challenges, was able to preserve the intellectual heritage of the ancient world. The Byzantine scriptoria, far from being places of stagnation, were centers of scholarly activity. They ensured that the knowledge of the Greeks and Romans was not lost to time but was instead passed down through generations. The texts that were carefully transcribed in these scriptoria would eventually make their way to the Western world during the Renaissance, sparking a revival of classical learning and thought. The Byzantine approach to knowledge preservation also reflected a broader difference in attitude between the Western and Eastern Roman empires. While the West's decline was marked by fragmentation, neglect, and loss, the Byzantine Empire's continuity allowed it to focus on long-term cultural preservation. The Byzantines understood that knowledge was the foundation of civilization, and they took active steps to protect and pass it on. This commitment to learning helped the Byzantine Empire not only survive but thrive for centuries, long after the fall of the West. In the end, the contrast between the lost libraries of Rome and the Byzantine scriptoria is a story of intellectual preservation versus intellectual loss. While the Western Roman Empire's libraries were plundered and destroyed, the Byzantine Empire's monks and scholars ensured that the knowledge of the ancient world would live on, safeguarded from the ravages of time and conflict. This dedication to the written word became one of the Byzantine Empire's most enduring legacies, and it helped preserve the foundation of Western civilization for future generations. In the fading days of the Western Roman Empire, imagine yourself as a patrician in Rome, standing in a grand villa overlooking the Tiber River. The lavish estate you inhabit is a symbol of your family's centuries-old wealth and power. Your ancestors once held high office, their names etched in the annals of history. You wear the finest tunics, draped in silks imported from the East, and your halls are adorned with marble statues that honor the gods, your lineage, and the mighty empire you once served. Yet, as you stand in your opulent garden, you cannot ignore the feeling of disquiet that lingers in the air. The empire that once seemed invincible is crumbling around you, and you, as a member of the Roman elite, feel increasingly powerless. The emperor is no longer a figure of respect but one of insignificance, unable to hold the empire together. The political factions that once supported the unity of Rome now only work to fragment it further, and you, like many others in the elite class, have withdrawn into the comforts of your villa, turning a blind eye to the chaos that consumes the streets of Rome. Your position as a patrician has become one of isolation. Though you still wield influence, it is largely limited to the land you own, the clients who depend on you, and the wealth that sustains your family's lifestyle. In the past, your role as a senator would have meant power over policy, military decisions, and the fate of the empire. Now, those responsibilities have been diminished, replaced by personal indulgence and self-preservation. As the empire weakens and the Western Roman Empire dissolves, you are left with the trappings of power, but no real control. You are an heir to a fading legacy, caught in a world that no longer holds the same meaning or purpose. On the other side of the empire, in the Byzantine court of Constantinople, you are not a patrician. Instead, you are a eunuch, a high-ranking official within the imperial palace. Your origins are far from noble, but through skill, cunning, and service to the emperor, you have risen to power. Eunuchs in the Byzantine Empire were often the trusted advisors of the emperor, wielding significant influence in political and military affairs. While your personal fate may seem bleak, having undergone the painful and irreversible procedure that marks you as different, your role in the Byzantine court is one of immense power. Unlike the patricians of the West, whose political clout has been gradually eroded by the collapse of Roman authority, you, as a eunuch, are indispensable to the emperor's inner circle. Your status as a eunuch is both a symbol of your loyalty and your access to the emperor's trust. In the Byzantine court, eunuchs were often employed as secretaries, treasurers, and even military commanders. Their lack of familial ties, combined with their perceived neutrality in matters of succession, made them ideal candidates for the highest positions of power. As you stand in the imperial palace, overseeing the affairs of the empire, you realize that your influence far exceeds that of many of the once powerful Roman patricians. You are not bound by the same hereditary expectations or family rivalries that plagued the Western aristocracy. Instead, your loyalty to the emperor, and the emperor alone, allows you to navigate the treacherous waters of Byzantine politics with ease. The role of the eunuch in the Byzantine Empire is a remarkable contrast to the life of the Roman patrician. While the patricians in Rome were born into their power, often relying on inherited wealth and political alliances, the eunuchs in Byzantium rose to prominence through their service to the emperor. Their power was not defined by lineage but by their intelligence, loyalty, and adaptability. Unlike the Roman patricians, whose influence faded as the empire collapsed, eunuchs maintained their influence throughout the Byzantine Empire's long existence. They were key figures in maintaining the stability of the empire, serving as intermediaries between the emperor and the people, and often acting as the real power behind the throne. In fact, some of the most powerful figures in Byzantine history were eunuchs. Men like Narses, who served as the chief military officer under Emperor Justinian, and Eustathius, a key administrator during the reign of Emperor Basil II, were eunuchs who wielded incredible influence. They were able to rise through the ranks of the Byzantine bureaucracy, despite their lack of traditional noble birth, because of their intellect, political acumen, and unwavering loyalty to the emperor. In this way, the eunuchs of Byzantium were able to secure their positions as powerful figures in a way that the patricians of Rome never could. The rise of the eunuchs in Byzantium represents a broader shift in the empire's political structure. In the Roman West, power was increasingly concentrated in the hands of the hereditary aristocracy, whose wealth and land gave them significant influence. However, as the empire fractured and the old political structures collapsed, the patricians found themselves increasingly irrelevant. Their land was raided by barbarian invaders, their power was undermined by local factions, and their political influence dwindled. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire retained a more centralized form of government, one in which the emperor held supreme power. This system allowed for the rise of individuals like the eunuchs, whose power was based not on birthright but on their ability to serve the emperor effectively. The comparison between the Roman patricians and the Byzantine eunuchs is a striking one. On the one hand, you have the old guard of Roman aristocracy, whose power and influence were eroded by the decline of the Western Roman Empire. On the other hand, you have the rise of the eunuchs, individuals who, despite their humble beginnings, were able to carve out significant roles within the Byzantine Empire. The contrast between these two social groups highlights the different paths taken by the Western and Eastern Roman empires. While the Western Roman Empire became increasingly fragmented, the Byzantine Empire adapted to changing political realities, allowing for the rise of new power structures and new sources of authority. As a Roman patrician, you may watch the decline of your empire with a sense of helplessness. Your power is fading, and the future of your legacy is uncertain. Meanwhile, as a Byzantine eunuch, you stand at the center of the imperial court, a key player in the survival of your empire. You may have sacrificed much to reach this point, but your position offers you unparalleled influence. The contrast between the two, one bound by family ties and the other by loyalty to the emperor, reveals the different strategies that enabled the Eastern Roman Empire to endure long after the Western Roman Empire fell. Imagine yourself transported to two distinct arenas of the ancient world, where the air is filled with the roars of the crowd and the tension of impending action. On one side, you find yourself standing in the Colosseum of Rome, the grand amphitheater that has become a symbol of Roman power and entertainment. The air is thick with excitement as thousands of spectators gather, eagerly awaiting the start of the next gladiatorial combat. The sun blazes down on the sand of the arena, which has seen countless battles, fights to the death between skilled warriors who once fought for honor, but who now fight simply to survive. You can hear the clanking of armor, the crackle of weapons, and the cries of the crowd, urging the gladiators to fight harder, faster, to entertain them. The gladiators, many of whom are slaves or prisoners of war, are more than mere combatants. They are the ultimate symbols of Roman spectacle, fighting not for personal glory, but for the pleasure of the people. They stand at the center of an empire that has built its wealth and power through conquest, a world where violence and bloodshed are common tools of both entertainment and political control. The spectacle of the gladiatorial games is a reflection of Roman values, strength, bravery, and dominance. Yet beneath the surface of these games lies a deeper truth. These men are often little more than pawns, used to uphold the empire's reputation and satisfy the bloodlust of the Roman people. The games are brutal, ruthless, and unforgiving, but they serve to remind all who watch that Roman power is unyielding, and that its might is unquestionable. Now, imagine yourself in the bustling hippodrome of Constantinople, the heart of Byzantine entertainment, and the site of the grand chariot races. The atmosphere here is just as charged as it was in the Colosseum, but the stakes feel different. The chariot races, held in the massive stadium that could hold over 100,000 spectators, are a show of speed, skill, and strategy. The races are the highlight of the day for both the nobility and the commoners alike, and they are the stage for fierce rivalries that are more than just about athletic prowess. They are deeply political. The teams, each one supported by a faction, compete not just for victory but for the favor of the emperor, who often watches from his imperial box, his presence a reminder of the importance of these races in the social and political life of the empire. As you watch the chariots race around the track, you notice the excitement that builds with each lap. The chariots, pulled by 4 horses, hurtle around the track at incredible speeds, their wheels kicking up dust and their drivers swerving in a desperate attempt to maintain control. The crowd cheers wildly as the charioteers navigate the dangerous turns of the course, risking life and limb for the chance to win the favor of the emperor and the adoration of the people. But unlike the gladiators, who face the grim reality of death in the arena, the charioteers are there to entertain with speed, agility, and daring, rather than to spill blood in combat. The races are a symbol of Byzantine pride, a display of skill and competition that reflects the strategic and intellectual prowess of the empire. Despite the difference in the nature of these spectacles, violent gladiatorial combat in Rome versus the high-speed races of Constantinople, both arenas share something in common. They were central to the public life of their respective empires, a means of engaging the masses, and a way to reinforce the authority of the rulers. In Rome, the gladiatorial games were not just entertainment, they were a tool of control. The games were used to placate the population, to provide a distraction from the hardships of daily life, and to remind them of the might of the empire. Emperors used the games to showcase their power, and even to make political statements. The gladiators, many of whom were slaves, were a direct symbol of the empire's imperial power, conquered people forced to fight in front of an adoring crowd. In Constantinople, the chariot races held a similar function, but the nature of the races meant that they were often tied to political and social factions. The most famous of these were the Blues and the Greens, 2 rival factions that supported different chariot teams. These factions were not just fans, they were powerful political organizations, with their own networks of supporters, merchants, and even soldiers. The races were deeply political, and often, the rivalry between the Blues and the Greens would spill over into the streets, creating tension and unrest. In fact, the infamous Nika riots of 532 CE, which nearly led to the overthrow of Emperor Justinian, were sparked by the rivalry between these 2 factions. This was a reminder that, for all the grandeur and pageantry of the races, they were never just about sport. They were a reflection of the deep divisions within Byzantine society, and a way for the people to express their discontent or support for their rulers. The contrast between the gladiators in Rome and the charioteers in Constantinople reflects deeper differences in the 2 empires. In Rome, the gladiators were symbols of the empire's military might and the spectacle of Roman domination. They were brutal contests designed to remind the people of the power of Rome, and their death was often seen as a sacrifice to that power. In Constantinople, the chariot races were a celebration of speed, skill, and competition, but they were also a reminder of the complex political and social networks that defined Byzantine society. The charioteers, unlike the gladiators, did not fight to the death, but their races still held immense political significance, often tied to the emperor's power and the whims of the crowd. Both spectacles were designed to reinforce the ruler's control, but in different ways. The Roman emperor used the bloodshed of gladiatorial combat to remind the people of his dominance, while the Byzantine emperor used the excitement of the races to engage the people in the political life of the empire. The arenas of both cities were places where the rulers could demonstrate their power and maintain the loyalty of the people, but the nature of the entertainment, violent and sacrificial in Rome, thrilling and strategic in Constantinople, reveals the different cultural attitudes of the two empires. As you leave the Hippodrome in Constantinople or the Colosseum in Rome, you reflect on the role that these spectacles played in the life of the empires. The gladiators and chariot races were more than just entertainment. They were a reflection of the power structures, political realities, and cultural values of their respective empires. Rome's gladiatorial games showcased the empire's military dominance and imperial control, while Constantinople's chariot races, though thrilling and exciting, were a reminder of the complex social and political networks that defined the Byzantine Empire. In the heart of two distinct periods of Roman history, imagine standing at the crossroads where religion, law, and politics meet, each shaping the course of the empire in a different way. On one side, you find the year 313 CE, and the momentous decision of Emperor Constantine, the Edict of Milan. You stand within the imperial palace, where Constantine has just issued an edict that will change the course of Roman history. The decision to legalize Christianity within the empire is revolutionary, but it also signifies a new direction for the Roman world. For centuries, Christians had been persecuted, their faith seen as a threat to the unity of the empire. Now Constantine, a ruler born out of the chaos of civil wars and political fragmentation, is embracing Christianity, believing that it will unite his fractured empire. His vision is clear: religion will play a pivotal role in securing the empire's future, and Christianity will become the unifying force that binds its people together. As the emperor stands before you, you feel the weight of this decision, one that will define the future of not just Rome but the entire Western world. The Edict of Milan, issued alongside his co-emperor Licinius, grants religious tolerance to all faiths. But it is the favoring of Christianity that marks a significant shift. Christianity, once banned and persecuted under previous emperors, is now embraced by the emperor himself. Churches are to be built, Christian bishops are to be respected, and the Christian faith is to be protected by the imperial authority. Constantine's own conversion, after a vision of the cross before a pivotal battle, is now reinforced by this declaration. The Edict of Milan is the turning point, marking the beginning of a new era where Christianity will flourish in the empire, eventually becoming the state religion by the end of the century. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. The Edict of Milan heralds not only the end of Christian persecution but the beginning of the Byzantine Empire's deep association with Christianity. Constantine sees the Church not just as a spiritual entity, but as a political one that can help him strengthen his rule, create unity in a divided empire, and establish a lasting legacy. By legalizing Christianity, Constantine solidifies his place as the first Christian emperor, setting the stage for future emperors to follow in his footsteps. Now let your imagination shift from the reign of Constantine to that of Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. You find yourself in the imperial palace in Constantinople, witnessing another transformative moment: the codification of Byzantine law through Justinian's code. Unlike Constantine, who sought to unify the empire through religious tolerance and favoring Christianity, Justinian's focus is on the law. He seeks to consolidate the diverse and often contradictory laws that govern the empire and to create a system that will not only preserve the empire's traditions but also strengthen it in the face of external threats and internal instability. As you observe Justinian at work, you see the meticulous process of legal reform taking shape. His goal is clear: to systematize and simplify the vast body of Roman law that has accumulated over centuries. His code will not only address legal matters but will also reflect the changing nature of the empire, which now, more than ever, needs clear and unambiguous legal standards to guide its people. The result is the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the Body of Civil Law, a monumental work that consolidates existing laws and institutes new ones, providing a foundation for the Byzantine Empire's legal system. This legal code touches everything from property law to the rights of individuals, from the punishment of crimes to the regulation of the economy. The impact of Justinian's code extends far beyond his own empire, as it will later influence the development of legal systems throughout Europe, especially in the medieval period. While the Edict of Milan represents a religious and political shift in the empire, Justinian's code is the culmination of an effort to solidify Roman law into a cohesive and enduring system. The code is designed not only to reflect the changing nature of the Byzantine Empire but also to protect it from internal divisions. In many ways, it serves as the backbone of Byzantine society, ensuring that its citizens know the laws that govern them and providing a legal framework for resolving disputes. It is a key component of Justinian's ambition to preserve Roman traditions while adapting them to the new reality of the Byzantine world. The contrast between these two monumental reforms, the Edict of Milan and Justinian's Code, highlights the different ways in which the Western Roman and Byzantine empires sought to secure their futures. Constantine's Edict of Milan was a bold move to unite the empire through religious tolerance and the establishment of Christianity as a state religion. By embracing Christianity, Constantine sought to create a new foundation for the empire's future, one that could unite a fractured society and provide a sense of cohesion. In contrast, Justinian's Code represents a legalistic approach to unity. Rather than relying on religious favor or political alliances, Justinian sought to create a system of laws that would ensure stability, justice, and fairness within the empire. In both cases, these rulers recognized the need for change. Constantine saw the power of religion as a unifying force, while Justinian understood that a strong legal system was essential for maintaining order in a complex and diverse empire. Both reforms were driven by the need to preserve and strengthen their respective empires, and both had lasting effects that would reverberate through history. Constantine's edict laid the groundwork for the Byzantine Empire's long association with Christianity, which would define its cultural and religious identity for centuries. Justinian's Code, on the other hand, provided the legal foundation that would support the empire's governance and ensure its stability for generations to come. As you reflect on these two reforms, you begin to understand the different paths that the Western Roman and Byzantine empires took in their attempts to preserve their power. Constantine's embrace of Christianity was a shift in the empire's cultural and spiritual identity, while Justinian's legal reforms sought to address the structural and administrative needs of the empire. Together, these reforms represent the Byzantine Empire's ability to adapt and evolve, ensuring its survival long after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Imagine yourself standing in the bustling streets of Rome, a city that, in 165 CE, is still the heart of the mighty Western Roman Empire. The Tiber River flows lazily past, and the vast network of Roman roads stretches out, radiating from the city like the arteries of an empire. The market is full of traders from across the empire, selling spices, textiles, and wine from the farthest reaches of Rome's vast dominions. Yet beneath the surface of this vibrant urban life, something dark and unseen is spreading. You hear rumors of a disease sweeping across the empire, striking soldiers and civilians alike. It begins as a faint unease, occasional reports of sickness and death in the distant provinces. But soon, those rumors reach the heart of the empire. You are living in the time of the Antonine Plague, which would become one of the most devastating pandemics to strike the Roman Empire. The disease, which would likely be identified today as smallpox, first appeared in the eastern provinces of the empire, and it spreads like wildfire. Before long, the mighty city of Rome itself is gripped by panic. The population swells to over 1 million people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time, and the streets become filled with the sick and the dying. You witness firsthand the disarray that a disease can bring to a world that once seemed invulnerable. The Roman legions, which have long been a symbol of the empire's strength, are struck down by the plague. The soldiers, veterans who once fought to secure the borders of the empire, now lie sick and dying in their camps, unable to defend Rome from the growing threat of external invaders. As the disease spreads through the empire, the emperor, Marcus Aurelius, does what he can to manage the situation. He continues his military campaigns against the Germanic tribes along the northern border, but the empire's resources are stretched thin as more and more soldiers succumb to the plague. The markets are less crowded, and goods become more expensive as trade slows. Even the once imposing Roman infrastructure, including the iconic aqueducts and road systems, begins to suffer, as the manpower needed to maintain them dwindles. The social fabric begins to tear as whole families and neighborhoods are devastated by the plague. In some areas, entire villages are abandoned, their inhabitants wiped out by the invisible scourge that has come from the east. The population of the empire is reduced by an estimated 5 million people, and the empire's ability to maintain its power, unity, and military effectiveness begins to weaken. You, as a Roman citizen, witness the slow unraveling of the empire as its people and military forces are decimated by the Antonine Plague. Even though the empire survives, the long-term effects of the pandemic are profound. The Roman military, which once enjoyed dominance over the known world, is now compromised, weakened by the losses it has sustained. In the aftermath, Rome finds itself increasingly vulnerable to external pressures, as invading barbarian tribes take advantage of the empire's weakened borders. The plague contributes to the growing internal strife and fragmentation that would eventually lead to the Western Roman Empire's collapse in the 5th century. What was once a mighty empire now faces an uncertain future, and the memory of the Antonine Plague lingers in the minds of its people as a reminder of the vulnerability of even the greatest civilizations. Now, let us shift to a time nearly 4 centuries later. The year is 541 C, and you find yourself in the bustling capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. The city is full of life, as Emperor Justinian's ambitions for territorial expansion and the re-establishment of the Roman Empire continued to thrive. However, the bright future of the Byzantine Empire is suddenly overshadowed by the appearance of another deadly disease, the plague that will come to bear the name of the emperor's reign, the Justinian Plague. You walk through the streets, where the city's inhabitants are going about their business, unaware that disaster is about to strike. The Justinian Plague, carried by fleas living on rats, first enters Constantinople in the spring of 541 C, and it spreads like wildfire. Within weeks, the bustling city that once seemed untouchable becomes a hotbed of infection. Unlike the Antonine Plague, which primarily affected the military and rural populations, the Justinian Plague strikes deep into the heart of urban society, spreading rapidly through the densely packed city of Constantinople. The effects are immediate and catastrophic. You hear stories of entire families falling ill, of neighborhoods becoming ghost towns as the people succumb to the deadly disease. The symptoms are brutal: high fever, swelling of the lymph nodes, called buboes, and a painful, agonizing death. You walk through the streets, passing bodies left out in the open or hastily buried in mass graves. As the plague spreads across the empire, you witness the collapse of the city's social structure. The Byzantine Empire, already engaged in ambitious military campaigns to reclaim former Roman territories in the west, finds itself in turmoil. Emperor Justinian, who once seemed invincible, is now faced with a crisis unlike any he has ever known. The plague strikes his armies, forcing them to abandon campaigns and weakening his ability to restore Roman territories. With the Byzantine military compromised, the empire's borders become increasingly vulnerable, and the dream of a restored Roman Empire seems ever more distant. The Justinian Plague is far more lethal than the Antonine Plague, with historians estimating that it claimed the lives of anywhere from 25 to 50 million people over the course of several waves. The loss of life in Constantinople alone is staggering, with up to 40% of the population dying in a matter of months. In addition to the personal toll, the plague wreaks havoc on the economy. Trade is disrupted, agricultural production slows, and the once thriving city of Constantinople becomes a shadow of its former self. The empire's wealth is drained by the need for medical treatment, and the labor force is decimated, leaving Justinian with fewer resources to fund his grand projects. Yet, despite the overwhelming toll, the Byzantine Empire proves more resilient than its Western predecessor. Justinian, though deeply affected by the plague, does not give in to despair. His administration continues to function, and despite the staggering losses, the empire ultimately survives. The plague does not bring about the collapse of the Byzantine Empire as it did with the Western Roman Empire, but it does leave a scar on the empire's psyche. The social and economic damage caused by the plague is profound, and it shapes the course of Byzantine history in the years to come. The memories of the plague remain vivid in the minds of the Byzantine people, a reminder of the fragility of life and the empire's tenuous hold on its former glory. The Justinian Plague also marks a turning point in the way pandemics are understood and dealt with in the ancient world. The Roman world, with its vast network of trade and military infrastructure, had been unable to prevent the spread of the Antonine Plague. Similarly, the Byzantine Empire, with all its technological advancements and military prowess, is ultimately powerless in the face of this unseen enemy. Imagine the sun rising over the rolling hills of Italy as you march alongside the formidable Roman legions, the backbone of Rome's military might. The year is 100 C, and you are a Roman legionary, clad in the traditional larica segmentata, a type of segmented armor that covers your torso, providing both protection and flexibility. You carry a gladius at your side, the short sword that has become synonymous with Roman military prowess, and a large rectangular shield, the scutum, that has been used by legions for centuries to form the famous Roman battle formations. As you march across the empire, your feet pounding the well-maintained Roman roads, you know that you are part of something far greater than yourself, an empire that has conquered and maintained control over vast territories. Your life as a legionary is disciplined and strict. Every day, you undergo rigorous training, preparing for battle against enemy forces that threaten Rome's borders. The Roman legions, renowned for their organization, efficiency, and unwavering loyalty to the emperor, have been the empire's primary military force for centuries. The strategic deployment of the legions has enabled Rome to expand its influence across Europe, Asia, and Africa. As a legionary, you are expected to follow orders without question, to fight alongside your comrades, and to endure the hardships of campaign life. The Roman military is a well-oiled machine, and each legionary is a vital cog in that machine. Together, you and your fellow soldiers form the core of the Roman Empire's power, and with each conquest, you expand the empire's reach. Yet, despite the legion's impressive fighting abilities, there are limitations. Roman soldiers are trained to fight in formation, relying heavily on their shields and short-range weapons. While the Roman legions are exceptional at maintaining order in the chaos of battle, they can sometimes struggle against certain types of warfare, especially when faced with well-armed cavalry forces or mounted troops. In many instances, the legions find themselves at a disadvantage against heavily armored opponents who are able to outmaneuver them, particularly in the rough terrain of the empire's borders. For all their might, the Roman legions are not invincible, and as the Western Roman Empire begins to decline, the Roman military faces challenges that will ultimately contribute to its downfall. Now, imagine yourself in the Byzantine Empire, several centuries later, around 600 CE. You are no longer a Roman legionary, but a Byzantine cataphract, a heavily armored cavalryman serving the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. As a cataphract, your role in the Byzantine army is vastly different from that of the Roman legionary. You are mounted on horseback, wearing a full suit of armor, including a metal helmet, a cuirass, and iron or bronze armor plates that cover your body from head to toe. The cataphract is the epitome of Byzantine military innovation, a heavily armored, shock cavalry unit designed to charge into battle with overwhelming force. Unlike the Roman legions, which relied on infantry formations, the cataphracts were an elite cavalry force that could break enemy lines with their sheer weight and power. Your weapon of choice is the contus, a long, heavy spear that allows you to strike from a distance while remaining on horseback. The contus is a formidable weapon, capable of piercing through armor and causing devastation to infantry forces. You are trained to use the contus with precision, thrusting it into enemy lines as you charge forward on horseback. In addition to the contus, you carry a sword, typically a short one, for close-quarters combat once you've broken through the enemy's front lines. The cataphract's ability to quickly maneuver on horseback, combined with its heavy armor and powerful weapons, makes it a deadly force in battle. The cataphract's role in the Byzantine army reflects a significant shift in military tactics from the Roman legions of the past. While the Roman legions were designed for cohesion and discipline on the battlefield, the Byzantine cataphracts were more about individual impact and overwhelming force. The cataphract's ability to charge into battle with incredible speed and force allowed the Byzantines to dominate the battlefield, especially against infantry forces. The Byzantine military placed a high value on cavalry, recognizing that the speed, mobility, and shock value of cavalry units like the cataphracts could decisively impact the outcome of a battle. As a cataphract, you also benefit from a different military strategy. The Roman legions, though formidable, often relied on fixed formations and strategies that worked best in battlefields that allowed for discipline and control. But as the Byzantine Empire faced new threats, such as the Persians, Arabs, and later the Ottoman Turks, the need for more dynamic, fluid tactics became apparent. The cataphracts, with their mobility and devastating charges, were able to outmaneuver enemy forces and break through lines that the Roman legions could not. Another key difference between the two forces is their approach to leadership and organization. The Roman legions were highly structured, with commanders at various levels, from centurions leading small units to legates overseeing entire armies. The Roman system was one of hierarchy and strict discipline, with each soldier knowing their role within the larger formation. While the Byzantine cataphracts also followed a hierarchical structure, they operated with a level of flexibility that allowed for more independent action on the battlefield. The cataphracts, while part of a larger army, could operate in smaller, more agile units that could be deployed rapidly to exploit weaknesses in enemy lines. The evolution from the Roman legionaries to the Byzantine cataphracts also mirrors the broader changes in military strategy as the empires themselves transformed. The Roman Empire, with its vast territory and reliance on infantry, had to maintain large, disciplined armies to defend its borders. But as the empire fragmented and new threats emerged, military tactics had to evolve. The Byzantine Empire, though smaller, relied on a more mobile and specialized military force to protect its capital, Constantinople, and its eastern territories. The cataphracts, while not as numerous as the Roman legions, became a symbol of Byzantine strength, able to defend the empire from invasions and maintain control over vital trade routes and territories. The contrast between the Roman legionaries and the Byzantine cataphracts highlights the shifts in military priorities that occurred as the Roman Empire gave way to the Byzantine Empire. While the legions were focused on disciplined infantry tactics, the Byzantine cataphracts emphasized cavalry and speed, adapting to the changing needs of a more dynamic and threatened empire. This shift in military strategy allowed the Byzantine Empire to survive for centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, ensuring its place in history as one of the most resilient and innovative powers of the medieval world. Imagine yourself standing at the foot of Mount Parnassus in ancient Greece, gazing up at the towering peaks that framed the sacred site of the Oracle of Delphi. The year is around 500 BC, and you are a pilgrim who has traveled far to consult the oracle, Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, whose words are considered the voice of the god himself. As you walk towards the temple, the air is filled with the scent of incense, and the sound of the flowing Castalian spring echoes in the background. Inside the temple, you find Pythia, seated on her tripod, ready to channel the will of Apollo. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation as you wait for her to deliver her prophecy. The Oracle of Delphi was more than just a place of spiritual consultation. It was an institution deeply embedded in the political and social fabric of the Greek world. Kings and commoners alike sought her counsel before embarking on military campaigns, making political decisions, or undertaking significant life events. Her prophecies, often cryptic and open to interpretation, shaped the course of history, influencing the actions of leaders across the Greek world and beyond. As you listen to the oracle's words, you realize that the message is not just a prediction but a guiding force, shaping the future of empires and civilizations. The Oracle of Delphi was seen as the center of the ancient world, the navel of the earth, where divine wisdom was dispensed to those seeking guidance. For centuries, the oracle served as a crucial link between the mortal and divine realms, providing insights that were thought to come directly from the gods. The oracle's influence was felt far and wide, and her pronouncements were often treated as divine commandments. The power of the Oracle of Delphi was unquestioned, as it was believed that the gods themselves spoke through Pythia. But with the rise of new religions and changing political landscapes, the oracle's influence began to wane, especially as the Roman Empire expanded across the Mediterranean, bringing new ideas and philosophies to the forefront. Now, imagine yourself in Constantinople in the 9th century, in the heart of the Byzantine Empire. The political landscape has shifted, and the role of religion has become central to the life of the empire. Christianity has replaced the pagan traditions of the ancient world, and the Byzantine Empire, once the eastern half of the Roman Empire, is now a Christian state with a deep connection to its faith. You stand in the Hagia Sophia, the majestic cathedral that dominates the skyline of Constantinople, a symbol of Byzantine power, glory, and devotion. The air is thick with incense, and the sounds of hymns echo through the vast space. But unlike the ancient world, where gods and oracles were consulted for guidance, the divine presence in the Byzantine world is represented through sacred images, icons. In the Byzantine Empire, the veneration of icons became a central aspect of religious life. Icons, religious images, typically painted on wood or created in mosaics, depicted Christ, the Virgin Mary, and various saints. These icons were not merely artistic representations. They were believed to be a conduit through which the faithful could communicate with the divine. Unlike the ancient oracles, which were seen as the direct voice of the gods, icons were seen as sacred vessels, imbued with divine presence. The faithful would often kiss the icons, light candles before them, and pray in their presence, believing that the icon could mediate the blessings of the divine. The veneration of icons became so central to Byzantine Christianity that it sparked a massive theological controversy in the 8th century. Iconoclasm. The iconoclast controversy was a period of intense religious and political struggle in the Byzantine Empire, as emperors and church leaders debated the use of religious images in worship. Some saw the veneration of icons as idolatry, a dangerous practice that could lead people to worship the image itself rather than the divine presence it represented. Others, however, believed that icons were a necessary part of Christian devotion, serving as windows into the divine and tools for spiritual connection. The controversy raged for over a century, with periods of iconoclasm, the destruction of icons, alternating with periods of icon veneration. Eventually, the veneration of icons was restored in the 9th century, with the Second Council of Nicaea in 787 CE affirming that icons were to be venerated, not worshipped. The difference between the Oracle of Delphi and Byzantine icon veneration is not just one of religious practice, but of the very nature of divine interaction with humanity. The Oracle of Delphi represented a direct and often ambiguous communication with the gods, an intermediary whose words were believed to hold divine truth, albeit in a cryptic and symbolic form. The oracle was a site of mystery and awe, where individuals sought guidance for the future, but the response was often open to interpretation, leaving the seeker to decipher the meaning. In contrast, Byzantine icon veneration focused on the tangible, visual representation of the divine. Icons were not voices of prophecy, but images meant to inspire reverence and devotion. They were seen as sacred tools for communion with God, and their veneration was rooted in a theology that emphasized the incarnation of Christ, God made visible in the form of human flesh. For the Byzantines, the icon was a way to make the divine present and accessible, something that could be touched, seen, and revered. While the Oracle of Delphi represented an ancient, polytheistic world where gods and humans interacted through cryptic messages, Byzantine icon veneration was part of a Christian theological framework that emphasized the incarnation of the divine. The shift from the oracle to the icon reflects the broader religious transformation that took place in the ancient Mediterranean world, from paganism to Christianity. In the pagan world, the gods were distant and mysterious. They were revealed through oracles, omens, and signs. In the Christian world, God was believed to have come down to earth in the person of Jesus Christ, making the divine more accessible and tangible. Icons, therefore, were not just representations of saints or Christ. They were seen as a way to participate in the divine presence that had once been distant and unknowable. Yet, despite the different theological underpinnings, both the Oracle of Delphi and Byzantine icon veneration played similar roles in their respective societies. Both were seen as channels of divine communication, places where the mortal world could interact with the divine. The oracle's cryptic words guided the actions of kings and generals, while the icons in Byzantine churches served as focal points for prayer and devotion, guiding the spiritual lives of the faithful. Both systems, in their own way, helped individuals feel connected to something greater than themselves, offering a sense of purpose, direction, and divine protection. The fall of the Oracle of Delphi and the rise of Byzantine icon veneration also marked the end of one era and the beginning of another in the Mediterranean world. The collapse of paganism and the rise of Christianity in the Byzantine Empire represents a shift from a polytheistic worldview to a monotheistic one, where the direct communication with the divine was no longer mediated by an oracle but by the tangible presence of sacred images. Imagine yourself in the bustling heart of ancient Rome, where the economy is built on the labor of slaves. It is around the 1st century BC, and you are a Roman slave, toiling away in the household of a wealthy patrician or perhaps working the fields on a grand estate. Your life is one of hardship and subjugation, bound by the chains of ownership and denied the basic freedoms enjoyed by free Romans. You live at the mercy of your master, whose whims dictate your daily existence. Whether you work as a craftsman, a servant, a gladiator, or a field hand, your labor contributes to the wealth and comfort of your owner, but offers you nothing in return. The life of a slave in ancient Rome is harsh and unforgiving. You have no legal rights, no family ties that can protect you, and no say in the direction of your life. As you go about your work, you may hear whispers of those who dare to resist, rebellions like the famous revolt of Spartacus, where slaves rose up against their masters. Yet these uprisings are often crushed with brutal force, and the punishment for rebellion is severe. Slaves are seen not as individuals, but as property to be bought, sold, and disposed of as needed. In Roman society, slaves are an integral part of the economy, with their labor powering everything from agriculture to domestic service to grand public works. Yet despite their centrality to Roman life, they are regarded as little more than tools, their humanity stripped away by the system that sustains them. Now, imagine yourself in the Byzantine Empire, several centuries later, in the year 800 CE. The Western Roman Empire has long since fallen, and the Byzantine Empire has taken its place, continuing the legacy of Roman law, culture, and governance in the East. You are not a slave, but a serf, part of the lower class in a feudal system that has emerged within the Byzantine Empire. As a serf, you work the land owned by a noble or the state, and while you are not a slave in the strictest sense, your life is far from free. You are bound to the land, unable to leave without the permission of your lord, and your labor supports the higher classes, just as the work of Roman slaves once did. However, unlike Roman slaves, you have some rights, at least in theory. You can own property, and you may have a family that you can live with. Yet your life is still one of labor and subjugation, with little hope for advancement. Unlike the chattel slavery of the Roman world, the serfdom of the Byzantine Empire is characterized by a different set of relationships. As a serf, you work the land and provide food, goods, and services to your lord in exchange for protection and the right to live on the land you cultivate. The Byzantine economy is heavily agrarian, and the serfs play a crucial role in ensuring the stability of the empire's agricultural output. However, serfdom in Byzantium is not free labor. While you may not face the extreme brutality of Roman slavery, your life is still constrained by the needs and whims of the landed aristocracy. You are tied to the estate you work on, and any move to a new area or change in status requires the approval of your lord. The Byzantine Empire's complex system of land ownership and taxation means that serfs often bear a heavy burden, as much of the harvest they produce is taken as rent or taxed by their masters. The relationship between serfs and their lords in Byzantium differs from the slavery system of ancient Rome in that serfs have some level of legal recognition and protection, though it is minimal. The Byzantine legal system, building on Roman law, recognizes that serfs have certain rights, such as the ability to marry, the right to be protected by their lord, and the right to their share of the harvest. However, these rights are often ignored in practice, and serfs remain deeply dependent on their masters for their survival. Unlike slaves, who were considered property with no personal autonomy, serfs were legally considered part of the land, and their status was passed down through generations. You, as a serf, may find that your children are born into the same condition, working the same fields and bound by the same restrictions. While Roman slavery was an institution that was central to the functioning of the empire, Byzantine serfdom is a more localized and agricultural system that reflects the empire's transition from the centralized, urbanized Roman system to a more feudal, agrarian one. Both systems, however, are rooted in inequality, where the labor of the lower classes supports the wealth and power of the upper classes. In the Roman world, slaves were treated as tools, objects of ownership to be bought, sold, and used. In Byzantium, while serfs had some legal status, they were still fundamentally trapped in a system that denied them true freedom. The Byzantine system of serfdom, like the Roman system of slavery, is heavily reliant on the control of land and resources. In many ways, serfs are still viewed as human property, bound to their land and dependent on their lords for everything from sustenance to legal protection. Yet, unlike Roman slaves, serfs in Byzantium often have families and communities, and their servitude is tied to the land they cultivate, rather than to a specific master. This creates a slightly different dynamic, one where serfs can sometimes find solidarity with other workers in similar positions, but still have little recourse to improve their situation. Despite the differences in the two systems, both Roman slavery and Byzantine serfdom share a fundamental characteristic. Both systems are designed to maintain the power of the elite, whether that elite is made up of wealthy patricians in Rome or landholding nobles in Byzantium. The labor of the lower classes supports the stability of both empires, but it is a labor that is rendered invisible and dehumanized by the systems that sustain them. In both cases, the lower classes are trapped in a system that gives them little power to change their fate, and their value is primarily determined by their ability to produce wealth for the ruling class. As you reflect on these two systems, Roman slavery and Byzantine serfdom, you realize that the differences between them lie more in the degree of control over the individual's life than in the overall structure of exploitation. Slaves in ancient Rome were seen as little more than property, whereas Byzantine serfs had some legal recognition, but they were still trapped in a cycle of labor that ensured the survival of the empire's elite. Both systems represent the deep inequality that underpinned the social structures of the ancient world, and both serve as a reminder of the vast gulf between the lives of the ruling class and the lives of those who labored to support them. Imagine yourself in the heart of Rome, in the year 64 CE, as the city is engulfed in flames. You stand in the narrow streets, watching in disbelief as the inferno spreads quickly through the heart of the city, devouring everything in its path. The fire, which began in the merchant shops near the Circus Maximus, has now raged for days. The winds push the flames, and the smoke fills the sky, blotting out the sun. The flames have consumed entire blocks, reducing once proud buildings to ash. Citizens scramble for their lives, trying to save what little they can. The air is thick with panic, the crackling of the fire, and the shouts of people as they run through the streets, seeking refuge wherever they can. The sight is horrifying. A city, the center of the Roman Empire, is burning to the ground. As the flames continue to spread, the emperor at the time, Nero, is distant, removed from the suffering of his people. While the city is consumed by fire, Nero allegedly plays his lyre, singing of the fall of Troy. Whether this is true or not, the story of Nero's indifference to the crisis becomes infamous, adding fuel to the flames of suspicion and resentment. In the aftermath of the fire, Nero would blame the Christians, using them as scapegoats for the destruction. The persecution of Christians intensifies, and many are executed in gruesome ways, accused of starting the fire. The Neronian persecution becomes a dark chapter in Rome's history, and the memory of the fire becomes forever associated with Nero's reign. The burning of Rome symbolizes the fragility of the empire, how quickly it could be brought to its knees by natural or human-caused disaster. But more than that, it also highlights the tension between the emperor and the people, a tension that would eventually culminate in the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, shift your focus to Constantinople in the year 532 CE, where a different kind of chaos erupts in the form of the Nika riots. The city is alive with tension as factions, rival political and social groups, clash in a violent revolt against the emperor, Justinian I. The Hippodrome, a vast arena for chariot races, is the epicenter of this unrest, and the two largest factions, the Blues and the Greens, have been at each other's throats for months. But this time, the anger of the people boils over into open rebellion. It begins with a simple dispute during a chariot race, but it quickly grows into a full-scale riot. Citizens flood the streets, shouting for the overthrow of the emperor. The tensions, which have been building for years due to high taxes, oppressive rule, and dissatisfaction with Justinian's policies, finally explode. The crowds in the Hippodrome chant, "Nika!" meaning, "Victory!" and they demand that Justinian step down. You, as a citizen of Constantinople, watch in horror as the violence escalates. The city that had once been the jewel of the Byzantine Empire is now in flames. The rioters set fire to parts of the city, looting and destroying buildings, and even storming the imperial palace. The emperor's forces are overwhelmed, and for a moment, it seems as though Justinian's reign might come to an abrupt and violent end. As the flames of the Nika riots spread, it becomes clear that the stability of the empire is at stake. The revolt is not just a simple protest, it is an existential threat to the Byzantine Empire. But as you stand on the streets of Constantinople, you realize that Justinian is not the passive observer that Nero was. The emperor, although initially hesitant, responds with force. He sends in his general, Belisarius, who leads the imperial army to crush the revolt. In the dead of night, the imperial forces surround the Hippodrome and launch a brutal attack on the rioters. Thousands are slaughtered, and the rebellion is swiftly quelled. Justinian, although shaken by the violence, secures his throne and begins the process of rebuilding the city. In the aftermath of the Nika riots, Justinian moves forward with his ambitious plans for reform, including the construction of the Hagia Sophia, a symbol of the power and permanence of his reign. The contrast between the burning of Rome and the Nika riots highlights the different ways in which the Roman and Byzantine empires responded to crisis. In Rome, the burning of the city in 64 CE was a disaster that underscored the empire's vulnerability. While Nero's response was infamous for its apathy and cruelty, the fire marked a point in Roman history when the empire seemed to be teetering on the edge. The destruction of the city was not only physical but symbolic. Rome, once the center of the known world, was now vulnerable to chaos, and Nero's reign became forever associated with its devastation. In contrast, the Nika riots in Constantinople were a direct challenge to the authority of the emperor. Justinian's response, though harsh, was decisive. He took a different approach than Nero did in Rome. Instead of letting the riot consume the city, he used force to maintain control and restore order. His decision to crush the rebellion was brutal but ultimately successful in preserving his rule and the integrity of the empire. The Nika riots, though they threatened Justinian's reign, were a test of the Byzantine Empire's resilience. In the end, Justinian emerged stronger, using the opportunity to solidify his power and continue his ambitious reforms. The Nika riots also marked a turning point for the Byzantine Empire. After the rebellion was crushed, Justinian embarked on a series of reforms, including the construction of the Hagia Sophia, a monumental achievement that would become a symbol of the strength and unity of the Byzantine Empire. The riots were a stark reminder of the volatility of Constantinople's social and political landscape, but they also showed the ability of the emperor to overcome such challenges. The burning of Rome and the Nika riots represent two pivotal moments in the histories of the Roman and Byzantine empires. In both cases, disaster struck, and the rulers faced immense challenges. Yet, while the fire in Rome symbolized the weakness and decline of the Western Roman Empire, the Nika riots in Constantinople became a symbol of the Byzantine Empire's resilience and strength. The two events demonstrate the different fates of the two empires, with Rome's destruction marking the beginning of its decline, while the Byzantine Empire, though shaken, continued to thrive for centuries after the Nika riots. Imagine yourself standing at the foot of one of the grandest achievements of Roman engineering, the aqueducts that brought water to the sprawling city of Rome. The year is around 100 CE, and as you look around the city, you see the evidence of the incredible infrastructure that has made Rome one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. Towering aqueducts, some of them stretching for miles across the countryside, have been constructed to carry water from distant springs and rivers into the heart of the city. These aqueducts are a symbol of Roman ingenuity, allowing the city to flourish by providing clean, fresh water for its citizens, its fountains, and its public baths. The Romans, with their advanced understanding of engineering, constructed these aqueducts with precision, using arches and gravity to carry the water across valleys, over hills, and through tunnels carved into the rock. The aqueducts are not just functional, they are monumental, awe-inspiring structures that speak to the power and grandeur of the Roman Empire. You can imagine standing in the shadow of one of these massive arches as water flows steadily through the channels, providing a constant, reliable supply of water to the citizens of Rome. The public baths, the fountains in the streets, and the irrigation systems for farming all rely on this network of aqueducts, which are one of the cornerstones of Roman urban life. The aqueducts allow Rome to thrive as one of the largest and most sophisticated cities in the ancient world, and they are integral to the empire's ability to support a large population and sustain its military. Yet, as you watch the flowing water and gaze up at the towering aqueducts, you also recognize that these structures, while magnificent, are ultimately fragile. The vastness of the Roman Empire and the reliance on these massive aqueducts leaves Rome vulnerable to natural disasters, invasions, and the inevitable wear and tear that comes with the passage of time. In the centuries following the height of the Roman Empire, as the Western Roman Empire begins to crumble, many of these aqueducts fall into disrepair. As barbarian invasions ravage the empire and the urban infrastructure decays, the aqueducts are no longer maintained, and the once thriving cities of Rome and other major centers lose their water supply. The collapse of the Roman aqueduct system is one of the many signs of the empire's decline, as the very structures that once sustained the empire's grandeur begin to wither and decay. Now, imagine yourself in the Byzantine Empire, in the heart of Constantinople in the 6th century, as the city stands at the crossroads of history. The Byzantines, inheriting the legacy of Roman engineering, have created their own system to ensure the survival of their capital. The year is 532 CE, and the city is in the midst of one of the most important architectural and engineering projects of its time, the construction of the Basilica Cistern. The city, built on a peninsula surrounded by water, faces its own challenges when it comes to water management. Though the Byzantines inherited the Roman aqueducts, they also recognized that the city needed more than just a steady supply of water. It needed a system that could store and protect water in times of siege, drought, or attack. The Basilica Cistern, built by Emperor Justinian I, is a marvel of Byzantine engineering, a massive underground reservoir capable of holding up to 80,000 cubic meters of water. As you descend into the cistern, you are struck by the cool, damp air and the sight of countless columns that support the weight of the ground above. The water in the cistern is clear and still, its surface reflecting the light from the dim lanterns hanging along the walls. The cistern, like the Roman aqueducts, is an engineering feat, but it serves a different purpose. Rather than bringing water from distant sources, it stores the water that is already available, ensuring that the city has a supply even in times of crisis. The Basilica Cistern was built with the foresight that Constantinople, like Rome before it, would face challenges, from sieges to fires to droughts, and the cistern would provide a reliable backup source of water during those difficult times. The contrast between the Roman aqueducts and the Byzantine cisterns is profound. The Roman aqueducts were designed to supply cities with a continuous flow of water, reflecting the Roman focus on large-scale infrastructure that could support urban growth and military needs. These aqueducts are part of the Roman Empire's commitment to creating permanent, impressive structures that symbolize its strength and reach. The aqueducts are a symbol of Roman pride, as they represent the empire's ability to control nature and provide for its people. By contrast, the Byzantine cisterns were designed with a more practical, defensive mindset. The cisterns, while still an impressive feat of engineering, reflect the changing nature of Byzantine society. The Byzantines, inheriting much of Roman culture and technology, adapted it to their own needs. Constantinople, with its vulnerable location and history of siege warfare, required a different approach to water management. The cisterns were built as a safeguard, a way to ensure the survival of the city during times of uncertainty. The Byzantines understood that their empire, though still powerful, could not rely on the same grandiose infrastructure that the Romans had built in the height of their power. Instead, they created a more sustainable, flexible system that could protect the people and resources of the empire during times of crisis. This shift from Roman aqueducts to Byzantine cisterns also mirrors the broader transformation from the Roman Empire to the Byzantine Empire. Rome, at its peak, was a vast, expansive empire that could afford to build massive, long-distance infrastructure projects. The aqueducts, like the empire itself, were symbols of Roman dominance over the natural world. But as the Western Roman Empire crumbled, and the Byzantine Empire emerged as a smaller, more localized power, the need for more adaptable and resilient systems became apparent. The cisterns, though not as grand as the aqueducts, were designed with an understanding of the empire's changing needs and vulnerabilities. Both the Roman aqueducts and the Byzantine cisterns are testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of their respective empires. The Roman aqueducts stand as a symbol of the empire's ability to build on a monumental scale, while the Byzantine cisterns reflect the empire's ability to adapt and ensure the survival of its capital. In a way, the two systems represent the broader themes of Roman and Byzantine history: the Roman Empire, with its vast, unyielding power, and the Byzantine Empire, with its careful preservation and adaptability in the face of challenges. Though their structures differ, both systems are integral to the functioning of their respective empires, supporting the people and ensuring that the cities they inhabit thrive, even in times of crisis. Imagine yourself in the heart of ancient Rome, around the 4th century CE, during a time of great upheaval and transformation. The Christian faith, which began as a small, persecuted movement within the Roman Empire, has now become a dominant force, shaping the very fabric of the empire. But as Christianity spreads, it brings with it theological divisions that threaten to fracture the unity of the Christian Church itself. The year is 325 CE, and the First Council of Nicaea is underway. Emperor Constantine, who has embraced Christianity and made it the official religion of the empire, seeks to address the growing divisions within the Christian community. At the heart of the debate is the nature of Christ. Was he fully divine, or was he also fully human? The Arian controversy, named after the priest Arius, who argued that Christ was not fully divine, has torn apart the Christian community. As you sit among the bishops and theologians at the council, you witness the intense debates that ensue. On one side, the Arians argue that Christ, though divine, was created by God and therefore not equal to God the Father. On the other side, the Nicene party, led by figures such as Athanasius, argue that Christ is co-eternal with the Father and fully divine. The debates are heated, and the stakes are high. Constantine, eager to maintain unity within the empire, presides over the council, but even he cannot settle the theological disagreements. In the end, the Nicene Creed is adopted, affirming the full divinity of Christ. The Arians are condemned, and the Christian community in the Roman Empire is officially divided. But the schisms within Christianity do not end with the Council of Nicaea. Over the next few centuries, the Christian Church continues to be torn apart by theological disputes. One of the most significant of these disputes is the rise of the papacy in the West, and the increasing authority of the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. As the Roman Empire itself begins to weaken and fragment, the Bishop of Rome becomes a central figure in the Christian world, wielding both spiritual and political power. The authority of the Pope grows, and with it, the tensions between the Pope and other Christian leaders, particularly the bishops of the Eastern Church, who have their own centers of power in places like Antioch and Alexandria. As the Western Roman Empire collapses in the 5th century, the Christian Church in the West becomes increasingly centralized under the authority of the Pope. This centralization is contrasted by the more decentralized structure of the Eastern Church, which is centered in Constantinople. Theological disputes continue to erupt, but there is also a growing sense of political rivalry between the Eastern and Western Christian churches. The two branches of Christianity, Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, begin to drift further apart, and the split between the two would eventually lead to the Great Schism of 1054 CE, when the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church officially separate. Now, fast forward to the Byzantine Empire in the 9th century, where you find yourself in the heart of Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Here, Christianity has taken on a different character. The Byzantine Empire has embraced Christianity, but unlike the Roman Catholic Church in the West, the Eastern Orthodox Church has developed a unique theological and ecclesiastical identity. The emperor, rather than the pope, holds supreme authority in the Byzantine Church. The emperor is seen not only as the political ruler of the empire but also as the protector of the Orthodox faith. In Constantinople, the patriarch of the Church is a key figure in both religious and political life, but his authority is always subordinate to the emperor. The theological unity in the Byzantine Empire is maintained through careful governance and the consolidation of power under the emperor. Unlike the fragmented Christian community in the West, where the papacy increasingly asserted its power over the Church and sought to influence political matters, the Byzantine Empire's centralized approach to both church and state allowed for a more unified system. The emperor, as the head of both the political and religious spheres, ensured that the Orthodox Church remained aligned with imperial goals. The Church in the East is not only a spiritual institution but also a crucial element of the state, integral to the empire's survival and prosperity. The role of icons in the Byzantine Church plays a crucial role in reinforcing the unity of the Orthodox faith. Icon veneration, the practice of venerating images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints, became a hallmark of Byzantine religious practice. Icons were seen as a direct connection to the divine, and their veneration was an essential part of Byzantine spirituality. However, this practice was not without controversy. The iconoclast controversy, which began in the early 8th century, questioned the use of icons in worship, leading to a split within the Byzantine Church. The Emperor, Leo III, led the iconoclastic movement, seeking to remove icons from the churches, believing that their veneration was a form of idolatry. This sparked fierce resistance from the clergy and many in the Byzantine population, leading to a period of religious conflict that would only end in the 9th century with the restoration of icon veneration. The Byzantine Orthodox Church, in contrast to the Roman Catholic Church, maintained a strict adherence to the Nicene Creed and focused on the unity of the faith under the authority of the emperor. The Great Schism of 1054, which formally separated the Eastern Orthodox Church from the Roman Catholic Church, was a culmination of centuries of theological, political, and cultural differences. The Pope in Rome and the Patriarch in Constantinople could not reconcile their differences, and the result was a split that would define the religious landscape of Europe for centuries to come. The contrast between the Christian schisms in Rome and Byzantine orthodoxy is one of centralization versus decentralization. In the West, the rise of the papacy led to a powerful, centralized authority in the hands of the Pope, whose influence extended far beyond the spiritual realm into the political sphere. In the East, the emperor held supreme power in both church and state, ensuring that religious disputes did not undermine the unity of the empire. While both systems faced challenges, the Byzantine approach to church-state relations allowed the empire to maintain a greater degree of unity in both religious and political matters. The theological debates and schisms that mark the early centuries of Christianity are not just matters of doctrine. They reflect deeper political and cultural divides between the Eastern and Western worlds. The Roman Catholic Church, with its emphasis on papal authority, would become a dominant force in the West, while the Eastern Orthodox Church would remain a pillar of Byzantine identity, deeply intertwined with the empire's political structure. The split between the two branches of Christianity, cemented by the Great Schism of 1054, marks a permanent divide that would shape the course of European history. As you reflect on the Christian schisms in Rome and the development of Byzantine orthodoxy, you see how religion, politics, and culture are inseparable in the history of both empires. The Roman Church, with its focus on papal power, was a force for unity in the West, but also a source of division. Imagine yourself standing at the foot of the great Roman road system, the vast network of highways that stretches across the Roman Empire, connecting cities and provinces with unparalleled efficiency. The year is 100 CE, and you are standing at a crossroads, where the paths of commerce, military, and communication intersect. The Romans, with their unparalleled engineering skill, have created an infrastructure that has no equal in the ancient world. The Roman roads are marvels of construction, straight, durable, and capable of withstanding the wear and tear of centuries. The roads are built with multiple layers of stone, gravel, and sand, all carefully designed to ensure that they can withstand the weight of the Roman legions and the traffic of merchants and travelers. As a Roman citizen or soldier, you understand the importance of these roads. They are more than just paths for travel, they are the lifeblood of the empire, allowing for the rapid movement of troops, goods, and information across vast distances. From Britain to the Near East, from Hispania to Egypt, the roads of the Roman Empire create a sense of unity, connecting distant provinces with the heart of the empire, Rome itself. The Roman roads enabled trade to flourish, as merchants can travel with relative ease, transporting goods such as olive oil, wine, grain, and pottery across the empire. For the military, the roads provide a strategic advantage, allowing legions to march quickly to any trouble spot in the empire, whether to defend the borders or to crush a rebellion. The Romans understood the strategic importance of their road system, and the roads were built with military efficiency in mind. As you walk along one of these roads, you can feel the echoes of Roman authority. The roads are a testament to the power of the empire, enabling it to exert control over its vast territories. However, despite the brilliance of the Roman road system, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE marks the decline of this infrastructure. As the empire fragments and the once stable political system collapses, the roads fall into disrepair. The barbarians, who ravage the Western Roman provinces, are quick to destroy the infrastructure that had once bound the empire together. Cities fall into ruin, and the once thriving trade routes are abandoned. The roads that had once been symbols of Roman power become neglected, overgrown, and impassable. For centuries, the roads of the Western Roman Empire lose their purpose and relevance, and the unity they once provided disintegrates as the empire fractures. Now let your imagination shift to the Byzantine Empire, several centuries later, in the 6th century CE. The Roman roads may have fallen into disrepair in the west, but the Byzantines, inheriting the legacy of their Roman predecessors, have found new ways to maintain connections across their empire. While the Byzantine Empire does not have the vast network of roads that the Romans once built, they have developed a robust system of trade routes that ensures the flow of goods, culture, and ideas across the empire and beyond. You are standing in Constantinople, the vibrant capital of the Byzantine Empire, where the trade routes of the east and west converge. The city, perched on the Bosphorus Strait, is a vital hub in a global network of commerce, stretching from Europe to Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. The Byzantine trade routes are as much a symbol of the empire's strategic position as they are of its resilience. Unlike the Roman roads, which were primarily designed for military efficiency and the rapid movement of troops, the Byzantine trade routes are built around the movement of goods. These routes connect Constantinople with the major trading centers of the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the Silk Road. From spices and silks to precious metals and ivory, goods flow into Constantinople, enriching the empire and providing it with the resources needed to maintain its strength. The Byzantines are expert traders, and their commercial activities span the globe, reaching as far as India, China, and sub-Saharan Africa. Constantinople, with its thriving marketplaces and docks, becomes the center of this vast web of trade, where merchants from all corners of the world converge to exchange goods and ideas. What sets the Byzantine trade routes apart from the Roman roads is their focus on maritime routes. The Byzantines, inheriting Rome's expertise in engineering, have expanded the scope of trade by making full use of the Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Black Sea. While the Roman Empire relied heavily on its road networks to maintain communication and control, the Byzantines took advantage of their strategic location to develop a powerful navy that could protect and expand their trade routes. The Byzantine navy plays a critical role in securing the empire's economic lifeblood, ensuring that goods can flow into Constantinople and that the empire's borders are protected from external threats. The maritime trade routes of the Byzantine Empire also enable the exchange of knowledge, culture, and religion. As goods move across the seas, so too do ideas, philosophies, and religious beliefs. The Byzantine Empire, with its strong Christian identity, serves as a bridge between the East and West, facilitating the spread of Christianity throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. The Byzantines not only control key trade routes but also serve as a cultural and intellectual crossroads, where the classical heritage of Rome meets the emerging religious and cultural movements of the East. While the Byzantine Empire may not have had the same extensive network of roads that the Romans built, the trade routes they established were just as vital to the empire's success. These routes allowed for the free exchange of goods and ideas, providing the Byzantine Empire with the resources and cultural exchange necessary for its survival. Constantinople, as the empire's central hub, benefited from its strategic location, with its trade routes connecting the empire to the Mediterranean, the Near East, and the far-flung lands of the Silk Road. The contrast between the Roman roads and the Byzantine trade routes reveals the different priorities and challenges faced by the two empires. The Roman roads, built with the goal of military efficiency, were instrumental in maintaining the empire's unity and military dominance. The Byzantine trade routes, by contrast, reflect the empire's shift towards commerce, culture, and defense through naval power. Both systems were essential for their respective empires, but while the Roman roads were symbols of imperial strength, the Byzantine trade routes are symbols of adaptability, resilience, and the empire's ability to maintain its influence in a rapidly changing world. Imagine yourself in the year 455 CE, standing in the great city of Rome as it faces one of the most devastating moments in its long history. The Vandals, a Germanic tribe that has been sweeping through the Western Roman Empire, have arrived at the gates of the Eternal City. Their leader, Genseric, has already made a name for himself by plundering and conquering across the empire, but Rome is his ultimate prize. The city, once a symbol of Roman grandeur and power, now lies vulnerable, its defenses weakened by years of internal strife and political instability. The Western Roman Empire, once vast and powerful, is on its last legs, and there is little the Emperor, Petronius Maximus, can do to stop the Vandals from marching into the city. As you watch from the walls of Rome, you feel the weight of history. The city's great walls, which had withstood countless invasions, are no match for the Vandal army, which has now breached the gates. What follows is an unprecedented sack of the city. While Rome had been sacked before, most famously by the Visigoths in 410 CE, this time, the Vandals make sure that the looting is thorough. For 2 weeks, the Vandals ransack Rome, stealing priceless treasures, art, and relics. The famous temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, once the heart of Roman religious life, is looted, and much of Rome's wealth is carted off to Carthage. The city is left in ruins, and the symbolic blow to the Western Roman Empire is devastating. The sack of Rome is not just the destruction of a city, it marks the end of the empire's power and prestige. The once mighty capital is now a shadow of its former self, its defenses broken and its people scattered. As you stand in the midst of the chaos, you realize that this sack of Rome is emblematic of the larger collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The Vandals, though fierce and skilled in battle, are not the cause of Rome's fall, but rather a symptom of the deeper issues that have plagued the empire for centuries. Rome's political corruption, economic instability, and weakening military defenses have made it vulnerable to foreign invaders. The sack by the Vandals is not just an event, it is the death knell of the Western Roman Empire, and it sets the stage for the empire's final dissolution in 476 CE. The Vandals, in their destruction, have laid bare the fragility of the empire and its inability to defend itself from external threats. Now, shift your gaze eastward to the 7th century, where another great city faces a siege of its own. Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, stands at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. It is a city with a rich history, built upon the ruins of ancient Byzantium, and it is now the center of the Byzantine world. The year is 674 CE, and the city faces an existential threat from the rising power of the Arab Caliphate. The Arabs, after conquering vast swathes of territory in the Middle East and North Africa, now turn their attention to the Byzantine capital. Led by the Caliph Muawiyah, the Arab forces aim to capture Constantinople, and with it, solidify their control over the eastern Mediterranean. As you stand on the walls of Constantinople, you can hear the sounds of the enemy camp, tents being pitched, weapons being sharpened, and the murmurs of men preparing for battle. The Byzantines are well aware of the threat posed by the Arabs, but they are not without hope. The city is protected by the legendary Theodosian walls, a series of formidable fortifications that have withstood countless attacks over the centuries. But this siege is different. The Arabs are not just using brute force, they have brought with them a new weapon, one that will change the course of the siege: Greek fire. Greek fire is a deadly incendiary weapon, a substance that can burn even on water, and it is the Byzantines' secret weapon in their defense of Constantinople. As the Arabs launch their siege, the Byzantines fight back with Greek fire, sending flames shooting through the air, setting the Arab ships alight as they approach the city's walls. The Arabs, taken by surprise, struggle to defend against the fire, and the siege begins to falter. For years, the Arabs attempt to capture Constantinople, but each time, they are repelled by the Byzantine defenders, who are able to use their superior fortifications, military strategy, and of course, Greek fire, to maintain their hold on the city. The Arab siege of Constantinople, though long and brutal, ultimately fails. By 678 C, the Arabs are forced to lift the siege, and Constantinople remains in Byzantine hands. The victory over the Arabs is a defining moment for the Byzantine Empire, demonstrating the resilience of the empire and its ability to withstand external threats. The failure of the Arabs to capture the city marks a significant turning point in the history of the Islamic Caliphate. The Byzantines have successfully defended their capital and preserved their empire's power, at least for the time being. When comparing the sack of Rome by the Vandals and the Arab sieges of Constantinople, we see two very different outcomes. The Vandals' sack of Rome is the culmination of the decline of the Western Roman Empire, a sign that the empire's glory days are over. The sack is an event that marks the death of the Western Empire, and the Vandals are one of many tribes that helped bring about its collapse. In contrast, the Arab sieges of Constantinople represent a different kind of challenge for the Byzantine Empire, a challenge that the Byzantines ultimately overcame. The failure of the Arabs to capture Constantinople is a testament to the Byzantine Empire's resilience and its ability to adapt to new threats. The differences between these two events reflect the contrasting fates of the Western Roman and Byzantine empires. The Western Roman Empire, after centuries of internal strife and external pressure, was unable to defend itself from invaders like the Vandals. The sack of Rome was the result of the empire's weakening military and political power. The Byzantine Empire, on the other hand, demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt to new threats and defend its capital. While the Arab sieges of Constantinople were a serious challenge, the Byzantines' superior military strategy, strong fortifications, and innovative use of weapons like Greek fire allowed them to survive. In the end, the sack of Rome and the Arab sieges of Constantinople are both defining moments in the histories of their respective empires. Rome's fall to the Vandals marks the end of the Western Roman Empire, while Constantinople's defense against the Arabs marks a moment of triumph for the Byzantine Empire. The contrast between these two events underscores the differences between the fates of the Western and Eastern Roman empires. One succumbed to external pressures and internal decay, while the other endured, evolving into a new era of power and influence in the Mediterranean world. Imagine yourself standing at the ruins of ancient Rome in the 5th century CE, a witness to the decline of one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. The once grand city, with its magnificent temples, bathhouses, and imperial palaces, is now a shadow of its former self. The streets, once filled with the bustling activity of merchants, soldiers, and senators, are quieter now, echoing with the sounds of decay and abandonment. The Western Roman Empire, after centuries of dominance, is crumbling. The final blow came in 476 CE, when the last Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the barbarian leader Odoacer. The fall of Rome is a moment of profound loss, not just for the empire itself, but for the entire Western world. It is the end of an era, a time when the ideals of Roman law, citizenship, and civilization seem to be slipping away into the past. As you walk through the ruins of the city, you feel the weight of history. The remnants of the Colosseum and the Roman Forum stand as silent witnesses to a civilization that once ruled the known world. The idea of the Roman Empire, its laws, its culture, its political system, has shaped the history of the West in profound ways. But now, in the wake of its collapse, the future seems uncertain. The great cities of the empire have fallen, and with them, the Roman legacy appears to be fading. Yet, even as the Western Roman Empire disintegrates, the legacy of Rome is far from gone. It lives on in the Christian Church, which has adopted many Roman practices and institutions, and it survives in the laws that continue to shape Western legal systems. The Roman concept of citizenship, the Roman Senate, and even the architecture of Roman temples and basilicas will influence the medieval world and later the Renaissance. In many ways, the memory of Rome persists in the form of its cultural, legal, and intellectual contributions, which continue to reverberate across the centuries. Now, imagine yourself in Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, some 1,000 miles to the east. The year is 1054 CE, and the Byzantine Empire stands as a proud successor to the Roman Empire. The capital, Constantinople, remains a thriving metropolis, a city of immense wealth and power, with its stunning architecture, its glittering markets, and its thriving religious and intellectual life. You stand in the Hagia Sophia, one of the greatest architectural feats of the Byzantine Empire, its dome soaring above you, a testament to the empire's engineering genius. The city's walls still stand strong, a reminder of the empire's military prowess, and its strategic position on the Bosphorus ensures that it remains a center of trade and culture, connecting the East and West. In many ways, the Byzantine Empire is the continuation of the Roman Empire. Though the empire's borders have shrunk over the centuries, the Byzantine Empire still carries the torch of Roman traditions, even as it adapts them to the changing world. The Byzantine legal system, based on Roman law, continues to influence the governance of the empire, and the concept of Roman citizenship is preserved through the idea of Byzantine subjects. The emperor, once the ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, now rules over the eastern Mediterranean, but his authority remains rooted in the ideals of Roman imperial power. The Byzantines see themselves as the heirs of Rome, continuing its legacy of civilization, law, and governance. However, as the centuries pass, the Byzantine Empire faces its own challenges. The rise of Islam in the 7th century, the Crusades in the 11th and 12th centuries, and the eventual rise of the Ottoman Turks in the 14th century all threatened the stability and security of the Byzantine Empire. Despite these external challenges, the Byzantines continued to hold on to their Roman heritage, blending it with the influence of Christianity and Eastern traditions. The Orthodox Church, with its Byzantine roots, becomes an integral part of the empire, shaping its identity and its worldview. The Byzantine Empire, through its art, its scholarship, and its diplomacy, ensures that the legacy of Rome is preserved, albeit in a new form. The contrast between the fate of the Western Roman Empire and the endurance of the Byzantine Empire highlights the resilience of Roman traditions and institutions. While the Western Roman Empire fell, its cultural and intellectual legacy did not disappear. The Byzantine Empire became the guardian of Roman knowledge and culture, ensuring that the ideals of Rome were preserved and adapted for future generations. The influence of Rome is evident in the Byzantine system of government, its legal codes, its art and architecture, and its intellectual life. The Byzantines took what was best from Rome and built upon it, creating a new empire that, while distinct, was deeply rooted in the Roman tradition. The legacy of Rome also lived on in the Western world, even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The revival of Roman ideas during the Renaissance, the adoption of Roman law in the development of Western legal systems, and the continued influence of Roman architecture and engineering all testified to the enduring power of the Roman legacy. The Renaissance, in particular, saw a rediscovery of Roman art, literature, and philosophy, as scholars in Italy and elsewhere sought to reconnect with the classical world. The idea of a republic, the notion of citizenship, the Roman legal system, all of these concepts influenced the development of modern Western political systems, including the American Constitution. While the Byzantine Empire may have eventually fallen to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, its influence continued to shape the world long after its collapse. The Orthodox Church, for example, continues to be a powerful force in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, preserving the religious traditions of Byzantium. The intellectual and cultural achievements of the Byzantines also lived on, influencing the development of scholarship and art in the Islamic world and the Renaissance. In the end, the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the enduring influence of Byzantium represent two distinct but interconnected chapters in the history of the Roman legacy. The Western Roman Empire may have fallen, but its cultural, legal, and intellectual contributions continued to shape the world for centuries to come. The Byzantine Empire, as the last great bastion of Roman civilization, ensured that the memory of Rome lived on, even as the world around it changed. The legacy of Rome is not just in its buildings and monuments, but in its ideas and institutions, which continue to influence the world today.